Hello everyone. This is going to be a little bit of an interesting stream that I've basically never done before, especially having Discord as the thing that I'm showcasing live on stream. So that's a little risky, but I have it so that like hopefully there's nothing bad showing up here. But we have a lot of submissions here. Like, oh my god, I cannot believe that there's this many people who wanted to have their timeline reviewed. It's honestly like really crazy to me that you guys want my feedback this much. And there's people still trying to submit things past the deadline. Uh, but it's gonna be hard to cover everything. Honestly, I don't know if I can. Um, I'll do my best, and there's been a lot of really amazing submissions with a lot of depth. You can tell by the number of messages, like 60 here, 42, other ones 26, 20, 41, 67. Like there's so much amazing lore here. And if you guys are interested in looking at these, they're all on my Discord server in the Loredad feedback event. Yes, they're basically all essays, and I cannot say that I had enough time to review all of them. So it's unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. And I got a ping on my Discord, and I am addicted to social media, so I need to see what that is. Oh, awesome. Okay. Ping me again again in 4. Okay. So, yeah. So we're gonna start off with just some random Brits timeline if I can find it. Original scenario, Freicoat Legacy. Just because like he's been very persistent with his desire for feedback. He often oh wow, that's crazy. There's still some Z posters. Wow. Okay. Okay, that's crazy. Okay. So this is a timeline. I think I've seen this a little bit before. Basically the idea here is that France is Jacobin more than it is imperialist, and because of that it causes maybe more wide of a revolution. The German Confederation here is supposed to be like I guess inspired by the liberal revolutions, and I guess the Iberian Union here as well. I think that these dark greens indicate influence. Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm I'm trying to do a stream, and then you're like trying to get my attention while I'm focusing on the stream. It doesn't matter. We're here now. The point is that this is inspired by you wanting to get my feedback so bad. So this stream is thanks to you. So let's look at that's all I meant to say. So just looking at the map here, I think that having a Confederate States and the USA divide is interesting. I've been wanting to look into this myself, but when it comes to like territorial acquisitions here, like it's kind of a lot. And then if the USA was divided and the British were already trying to get something in like New England here, right? I don't know if they would allow the Confederates to expand so much. It's not a Confederate victory timeline. This is just like other maps. So like this is the France. Like I didn't know you could do like. I don't know what game this is. Age of History 3 Definitive Edition. Okay, there you go. And it's just like a mapping tool for just some random Brit. So I'm gonna quickly just go down to the thing here. Oh, they're just typing. Okay, so that's good. So following the French Revolution, Jacobin movement, the moderate Jacobin ideology appeared, show up in the Republicans. So, okay, for context though, it's about Robespierre, where he remains the leader of the First Republic, but it's 1910. So there's already a problem here, because it's like I don't know too much about French history, but I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons why Napoleon was able to do so well once he had reigned the country is that he stopped the revolutionary period of the Jacobins chopping everyone's heads off. So the idea that it survives into 1910 is a little like far-fetched, but then again, it doesn't need to be grounded for it to be a good scenario. So then what else do we got here? So we have the Jacobin France also own, well, I think that's like a puppet state there. Yeah, there's a more detailed map here. So they have the Rhine as the boundary, which is like, yeah, you know what, fair enough, because that was considered the quote-unquote natural boundaries of France. So that makes sense. And then if they're Jacobin, it makes sense for them to have Republicans as allies. Puppet states just the Netherlands, I think. Revolutionary bloc. Okay. So this is all interesting. This is Second French Republic. So, hold on. So, his legacy would soon create a second Jacobin Republic by a less tyrannical Jacobin during the 1848 revolutions. Pushback Revolutionary, Hungarian Revolution, Jacobin government. So, like, I like how it's taking an aspect of history that's kind of overlooked, like it's often overshadowed by Napoleon drawing back the clock, and then seeing how this sort of revolutionary fervor would have impacted places like Hungary. But I don't think that this Hungarian Revolution would have happened in 1848. It would have happened way earlier if there was Jacobins still around. The entire point of the French Revolution and revolutions, like the dawning of liberalism, I don't know if Jacobins and liberals are specifically aligned. I think Jacobins are more associated with like early leftist movement. And again, I'm not a historian, so don't take that, like, take it with a grain of salt. But regardless, it was like, let's make, oh, I guess, no, it was the 1848 revolution of liberals that were like, let's make ethno-states out of all these monarchies that exist that are dividing up our kin. So the German Confederation, the 1848 revolution, they wanted all Germans to be under one state, right? And that would have also been the case for Hungary, but I don't think Hungary was a liberal republic. But it just wouldn't have necessarily manifested in that exact way, is what I'm trying to get at. So, and also the waiting for 1848. Like, it seems like one of the weaker points of this timeline is deciding to have it happen in 1919, or what was this time? The year is 1910. I think that's a little bit of an ambitious of a duration of alternate history. I find in my experience 30 years is about the max that you can go for alternate history before it becomes pure fiction. And I say that knowing Talons and Twilight is more than 30 years. I think it's like exactly at the 30-year point, actually. The start date is 1949 when the point of divergence was 1919. But with that, we're able to have a lot more flexibility in the way that we depict the world. And the reason why I say 30 is because that's usually when a next generation shows up. So then you're having people born that would have never been born, or people who would have been born never being born because of something that happened in 30 years. Like, there's the amount of reliance that you can have on history as guardrails reduces. So if I were to give feedback on this, I would focus more on making a map that suited somewhere closer to the 1848 period. Because there's another thing that I see a lot with alternate histories, is that all the cool stuff happens off screen, right? So if you have this France here that's like a new Jacobin, I want to see the transformation of a first republic to a second republic of France. And I want to see how the remaining nations of the world that decided or managed to not get partitioned by revolutionary France react to this new period of like Jacobinism, but more moderate. right? It could be that Jacobinists in the rest of Europe are attempting to moderate the revolutionary ideology in an attempt to preserve their states. So you could have like constitutional monarchies starting to appear organically rather than being enforced, right? To be clear, I didn't say it happened during 1848. This time is 1848. Right, but then the French Revolution happened in like the 1700s, right? I need to look this up. French Revolution. French Revolution, 1789. So 1789. So like 80 years, roughly. No, maybe not 80. I'm not that good. 60 years. So you have 60 years between the start of the French Revolution and 1848. So if it's like a different time, like if it happened earlier than 1848, if it happened later than 1848, then fine. But maybe make the map in the scenario exactly right before the 1848 revolutions happen. Yeah, no, don't worry about it. Like this isn't really on you. I think that part of it is this is me trying to do a new format and I don't know how to do it yet, so don't worry about it too much. But we have a lot of different ones to cover. So I'll try to quickly go over just what I see from the maps. So regardless of the like changing it to be closer to the point of divergence 1848, I think that would make some things like this Confederate States of America different, but based just off of vibes, the fact that there's where was that map here? Just based off vibes, the fact that Jacobinism is more important and then that influences the way that the U.S. political situation develops, leading to a conservative Confederate states existing earlier. Yeah, I think that this actually makes sense. When it comes to having New England here, oh yeah, and then also having the parallel be established when the British are revising the United States border. Like if this divide happens earlier, you could have like a Dominion of Columbia, where our timeline British Columbia is extended to just be Columbia, and then you have Dominion of Canada, Dominion of Columbia, kind of like how Aftershocks of the Revolutions does. And then if the Confederates show up earlier, you could have a Southern California if they even colonize California by the time this revolution happens, or secession happens. Or maybe the secession doesn't even happen and it's just like a constitutional issue. There's a lot of depth that you could do with the USA if you have this sort of thing happening earlier. So that's what I would recommend for your timeline. And then Germany, I feel like these German borders would be different. I don't know for sure though. Like really, you would have a better understanding of what you want to do. But yeah, we have a lot more to cover. So this is cool. If you guys want to talk more about this, it's in the Loredad feedback event. It's under Legacy of Maximilian Robespierre. I think he also has this detailed in another thread. I think in the alternate history sharing forum. Yeah, so you guys can check that out. I want to read chat here for a bit. I heard somebody say that I have a good voice for a podcast. Thank you. I would actually like to do something like that, but I don't even know who I would bring on to talk to and what we'd be talking about, right? I want to do this again. Yeah, maybe. I think that this is potentially a good format, but yeah, we have a lot to cover. So next up, so I'm going to go based off of upvotes and also mine because I'm more familiar with these ones, although I'm sure all of these are great. So this is a really crazy one. Like, look at how much depth there is here. So this is the Eagle Ascendant. Galactic, I've been familiar with this timeline for a bit. They have their own Discord server to discuss it on their own. I want to cover quickly these points of divergence because I think that these are interesting. And then maybe go down to the TLDR so that we can talk more about things going on here, right? So, the German submarine sinks early. Chancellor Theobald is more assertive when it comes to restricted submarine warfare. And this leads to the German Crown Council having restricted submarine warfare. So this is something that I, in my videos and just in general in the past, have been like, I don't think that Germany would have won World War One, even if they did restricted warfare to avoid the USA being brought into the conflict, due to reasons like a naval blockade causing internal political situations being untenable, causing a revolution, causing a let's leave this conflict early sort of thing. So that is my stance on it, but and I think Galactic knows this, and that's why they have this section here. So he says that there's no restricted warfare, but Arthur Zimmerman has no reason to send the telegram. I personally think that the telegram was just a convenient narrative. Like I'm sure it happened. I'm sure that the Zimmergram telegram was sent. But it was a very convenient public story to tell people so that they could go into the war. But regardless, like, let's just suspend our disbelief, right? The USA doesn't enter World War One. Why does it matter? It's been argued the United States did not enter the war. The Entente would have run out of credit. The convoy system would have sustained loot boats. Entente morale would remain low. All the loans led to Entente 1960 with secured collateral. Winston advised against unsecured loans. They're running out of it to face a reduction in available credit, thus the ability to purchase war materials. So it argued that Wilson might challenge the Entente blockade. So this unlikely. And then the British and Entente give up? No. The British found a way to source the raw materials needed for the war. So desperate, the British can easily cannibalize their own economy like the Germans did for the start of the war. If the economy system adopted the British. So regardless of these, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. Like, they're just not doing it. Okay, fair enough. Conspiracy dad? I mean, I don't know. Like, yeah, whatever. I'm not gonna get into that. 1917 naval incident. Okay, so this is really good lore. I don't have the time to cover it, right? So we have here like the way that things change in the offensives, the different offensives. This is all good stuff, good maps. Balkans, he's not talking about the Italian one. So this, I found this a little interesting. So it's like an alternate leader, the USSR, and it's the Union of Soviet Republics of Europe and Asia. That was a considered name for the USSR. I think I almost considered having the USSR in German October to have this name. I think I ended up not doing that just to keep people like familiar with the exact terminology. And then we have Vakov Sverdlov. So this is an interesting alternate leader. And there's a bunch of quotes here to explain more about who he was. He died in 1919. He died of the flu visiting Ukraine. So this is an interesting point of divergence that actually kind of makes sense, right? Thanks to America not joining the war, the flu arrived to Europe later. Furthermore, he had never needed to visit the Ukraine because it was already controlled by Germany. So, like, you know what? Fair enough. Then this guy would still be influential, right? Hold on. He's trying to understand divide his roles. So, like, basically, like, there's a bunch of reasons why this guy would be, the leader. The peace that ended the war, there'd be a Polish border strip, but it would be under the original conditions. And then these are the territorial acquisitions. It's quite modest with all things considered, which is like, you know, I like that. It's not like just like a Hoi 4 game where you take all of the things that you want, right? The peace that ended the war. Oh, yeah, he spoiled that because it could be tossed. So, oh, Jesus, excuse me. Okay, so Romania is under restrictions, but they are united with Bessarabia. Bulgaria gets a lot of land. Serbia is a really rump state. Greece still has a land connection here, which is nice, I suppose. Yeah, I'm going to quickly go over this stuff. So there's a lot of stuff here that's really good. Progressive and intervention linear wood. Okay, what else? Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff here. So I want to go down to the TLDR quickly. Okay, so made the 2016 US yeah, we have Redless, Alexander offensive, no Vardar offensive. Okay. Universe Asia. Okay. Peace 3, Austria gets a strip of territory of Italy. Constantinople of Caucasus. Ottomans lose their Arab territories. Okay. USA. Oh wait, how did they do that? Okay, interesting. Polish would be larger. Yeah, Bulgaria is crazy in the mod. What do we got here? USA Part 1, passing the Prohibition Amendment, not ratification. Recession gets worse. Democrats keep control of Senate. USW in 1918. Palmer raids. Yeah, those are the anti-socialist ones. They win the Democratic National Convention, which had Harding and Coolidge, McAdoo and Lewis. So Coolidge is like a conservative, and I guess Wood and Harding are progressives. So that's an interesting divergence there. McAdoo and Lewis led the DNC compared to OTL, which had Cox and FDR. Okay. Republicans win against Democrats in 1920. Wood's administration, desegregation, nice. Oh, that's not nice. Alternate League of Nations. You know, that's interesting. Like, would the League of Nations even exist? It was a example of like American exceptionalism under Wilson, where America was supposed to be the shining house on the hill that all other nations were supposed to copy or admire, and then his resolutions would have made sure that there was peace because there wouldn't be any conflict. But it was just the typical, like, America thinks they know everything about how the world should run, and then caused a lot of problems. But then, like, would the USA even be involved? The League of Nations sounds like foreign entanglements when the USA was pretty anti-entanglement. So I'm not too sure about that. I'm sure there's good explanations in the lore that I wish that I had more time to read, but I do not have that right now. Okay, I have August the 4th in Poland, Vilnius insurrection in Lithuania, Mindaugas, guerrilla warfare in the Baltic Duchy, Ukrainian civil war, Belarus being recognized by Germany, the Soviets, along partisan warfare there. Okay. Yeah, so like this is a really fleshed out timeline. I'm quite impressed with it and the amount of depth and research that's gone into it, and I really respect Galactic for spending a lot of time elaborating on everything. And I wish I had more time to respect the work that was put out into this submission. But when it comes to my feedback, yeah, I mean, I don't know. They clearly know more about history than I do. I'll see if I can find anything about the League of Nations. So he likely supports that international federal. Okay, in the international affairs, he also had some pro League of Nations in this time in our timeline, because these sentiments. He's forming an alternate League of Nations based off of Teddy Roosevelt's idea for one. I don't know what Teddy Roosevelt's ideas were for a League of Nations. I know he had like a League of Peace, and if that's the case, it kind of makes sense. It's like an extension of America's sphere. Maybe I wouldn't say that it's a alternate League of Nations though, right? It just call it like a League of Peace and it could be like a attempt for like isolationism or whatever. It could be an extension of the Monroe Doctrine. Those are things that you could do there, right? So just to remember, it's giving me some more input on his timeline. I can't spend more on your timeline. I need to focus on other people's now. Yeah. So yeah, this is really good. Basically no notes. And if I ever want to make a alternate history of Germany video, I'll definitely be talking to Galactic. So thank you for that. That's really good. I put certain ones on the thumbnail, so I have to go to those first. Clashing Eagles. So this is made by Inferno. He's a friend of the channel. And from what I've heard, it's a successor to Project Germania, or not a successor, a spiritual successor to Project Germania. I don't know too much about that though. All I know is that there's two different points of divergences that lead to Germany having an easier time in World War II, which is like a U.S. Civil War happens. Again, I can't talk to you right now, just remember it. We have the Greater German Reich here. We have, I think this is the Lockhart Autonomy. I think that's a Reichsprotectorate. This is Commissariat, Reichsland Caucasian. So it seems like there's like a different arrangement here, and it could just be for the resource extraction. This Reichskommissariat Ukraine is like, oh, why does Ukraine have all this? It's because it was a colony. It wasn't an actual autonomy. Jesus. And then same thing with Ostland, and this is a very complicated mess. But one interesting thing that I thought is worth noting, there's a Moscow Lake. This is something that Hitler wanted to do in our history. Get a bunch of water from the rest of the world and put it into Moscow. Like there's like rivers that you could dam or whatever and just flood the entire city. What was scrapped? The Moscow Lake, but 3 points of divergence. Whoa, okay, crazy. All right, so regardless, Caucasian is 99%. Okay, so we got one of those. It's a developing timeline, so things constantly change, etc., etc. Okay, commie pox is anti-imperialist pox. Yeah. Right. Yes, those are Soviet partisans. I'm pretty sure. This is an interesting split here. We're like, apparently this is outdated, so we're not going to worry too much about it. What we got here? So 1 point of divergence is that Zhang Zhulin, who was favored by Japan to unite China, but then when he failed in suppressing the Kuomintang revolution, he was killed by Japan for his like failure, right? So, but the bomb doesn't detonate. This leads him to survive a few years. Central Plains War, disarm the world as a China kind of rebellion. Kuomintang intervention of the army would be the deciding factor that led to Chiang Kai-shek's capture and installation of Yang Xishan as president and Wang Jingwei as prime minister. I don't know much about Yang Xishan, but I also know that Wang Jingwei was like really interested in leadership, and I don't know if it's kind of like a German Weimar Republic thing with a president and a prime minister, and they have different ideologies and what, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the political situation is. I think that Wang Jingwei would have been like way more attempting to have a revolution than being second fiddle to him. But let's see here. Japanese consolidated China to Manchuria. Okay. I don't know if this actually gets addressed, but that's just one of the things I first thing. Oh, that was the our timeline plan. Interesting. Okay. So that was already like a plan in real life with the Central Plains War, because I'm barely familiar with the Central Plains War. Wang Jingwei keeps trying to subvert Yang Xishan. Yeah, that makes sense. It is according to his character, given what he did during the Chiang Kai-shek era. The Soviet motherland is done. Okay. A drunk Stalin was extremely flirtatious with the other woman. In response, he threw something at her. Middle of the night. Oh. That's crazy. Okay, so that's a very unique way to kill Stalin. His wife is upset with him because he's flirting with other women. Molotov, Kalinin, and Kirov. So Kirov died in our history. Molotov and Kalinin. So I feel like I'm not exactly sure what year this is, but I'm pretty sure that there was a other triumvirate. Like, what was the Stalin triumvirate? Right? It was Zinoviev, Kamnev, and Stalin. Wouldn't Kamnev and Zinoviev be involved in this troika? Or was this after Stalin already purged them? If it's after he purged them, then that's fair enough, right? So Bukharin would take care of his plot in the Troika, causing it to be vaguely stable due to his less heavy-handed standards. Okay. Molotov, Bukharin tried both. Stalin Troika was destroyed in 1932, but they were still around. So, but then what do they do if they aren't, like, if they're alive? Soviet history is so hard to understand because Lenin, after his death, there was supposed to be like a cooperative leadership thing, but then Stalin did political maneuvering and then argued that there needed to be a new constitution, which fair enough, there needed to be, but then it caused him to have leadership because the leader of the party effectively became the leader of the state. They were defanged, but before they were killed. Okay. All right. Well, if that's how you want to take it, that's fine. But I would say that might need to be addressed a bit, just because it's a little bit of a divergence. So then again, like, does it really matter that much if the Soviets are going to die when it's a Axis victory timeline? So this is a civil war. So he spent the night for the introduction of the bill, lobbying personally Democrat. Hold on. Is this the president-elect immense power to circumvent Congress? Yeah, so this is the Roosevelt dictatorship bill. It's kind of hard to find information about this nowadays. For some reason, it's just gone. But there's some like newspaper clippings that there was a attempt for, there was a consideration that FDR should become a dictator, and this is before like there was a big wake up calls like dictatorships are not a good idea, which is kind of crazy to think like if America's a democracy you wouldn't do that. But it was people being like, oh, the Great Depression's bad, and they believed that Mussolini had fixed it by being a dictator, and the USA was like, hey, why don't we have him be a dictator then if we like his policies? And I'm pretty sure there was a Mussolini quote saying that my fascism is similar to your New Deal, and that's because of the aspect of like state intervention in the economy. People kind of misuse that a lot and equate FDR to being a fascist, which isn't really the case. But if he became a dictator through a bill that would allow him to circumvent Congress, then I would believe that would be a very fitting term to give FDR, because that is basically what the no, I wouldn't say basically, it's not really equatable, but the way that fascists in Italy had influence emulates that. So I can understand why there'd be a civil war to have that. Leaking the Georgia papers, conversation FDR while lobbying for the bill. Okay, I don't know if that's real or not. Congress would erupt into impeachment FDR and Garner. Communist Party of the United States and the American industrial world. Okay, yeah. Right. So the business plot was a plan with various disputed amounts of severity by wealthy individuals to install Smedley Butler as Secretary of General Affairs to FDR's reforms that would hurt their bottom line. So this is very much inspired by German October as well, because this is the same sort of dynamic I have happening in America in that timeline. Smedley Butler refused to cooperate with them. Okay. Smedley Butler's cooperation with the plotters ultimately... Yeah, okay. He's a dictator. Okay, and then... Yeah, so this is basically German October in a lot of ways. He would give code and concessions to business plotters to mind them. Factionism in Washington. Okay. Second coup against Butler. Liberty League. Okay, that's... Okay. So that's interesting. I have my own like thing for Semper Fidelis, which is like what this is in style. I want to get feedback on it, but then I'd be revealing things about what I would have done in this timeline, which is similar to what I did in German October. You know what I mean? Like if I want to make a second season about it, I don't want to spoil it here, so I'm not going to give feedback on this. American Legion to resist the Liberty League. Second American Civil War. Military starting loyalty to FDR. National Guards are torn. Yeah. So regardless, this is a really good scenario for a civil war to happen, which would lead to the USA not being able to be involved in World War II. So fair enough. I approve because I've made similar timeline to this already. I want to skip over to the Germany stuff. So, well, is there TLDR? There. So, yeah. Spanish Civil War stalemate. Wrapped into... Okay, interesting. Second American Civil War, moderately progressive coalition government. Okay. Dunkirk is worse. Yeah. Causing a temporary peace from 1940 to 1944. So, like a German and British peace until 1944. Are they involved in a war after that? Okay. Japan attacks the European powers in 1940. Is attacked by the U.S. in 1941, or taking territories in the U.S. Second American Civil War. An early quit India movement causes India to collapse. The USSR collapsed due to the NKVD and Troika infighting. Okay, fair enough. And the culmination of the crisis in the world leads to the British Empire collapsing and fighting bitterly during a sea lion. So there is a sea lion. Okay. What do you got here? Great Patriotic War. The Sun versus the Dragon Eagle. Oh. Okay, we're gonna listen to this before we go back to... wait, no, I think that might be true. No. Sorry, I really like that song, but it might be copyright, so we're gonna go back here. State of affairs in the German alliance, trade with Sweden, okay. Lord Halifax, oversee the battle for France. Dunkirk dustbin, okay. Lord Halifax eventually acting as desires to see German peace. Yeah, because he wasn't necessarily like a collaborator, but he didn't believe that there was a hope. Royal Navy is strongest. They're fighting IGA, but then India falls apart. Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, easternmost of the Raj, yep. All India Muslim League, Patriotic War. They did Operation Barbarossa, and they just trounced them. They have the Volga-Moscow Canal was sabotaged, and by the end of the day, Moscow was flooded, effectively wiped off the map. Similar fates have been planned for Leningrad and Kiev. While Kiev was dismantled, Leningrad was bombarded. Okay. I think the political situation at the time, the economic policies of fascism were not viewed in the same way as we view Nazism today. Yeah, I tried covering that quickly with what I was saying before. But I think even then, the idea of having a democracy that you install a dictator in, even if it's supposed to be temporary, is a really stupid idea. And I'm glad that it wasn't done. Okay, fascist coup d'etat. De facto coup d'etat. Okay, yeah. So there's an infighting there. Is the Germany demanded the UK halt any aid to the Spanish Republicans, or else the treaty would be nullified in order to resume. Ultimately, refused to concede. Okay, so because the UK is like still trying to involve themselves in the European sphere, there's a sea lion, and that's why Germany has colonies. Okay, fair enough. So I'm gonna get to a verdict soon, just because we have so much to go through, and I really respect Inferno for giving this depth, in that I feel honored that he would take inspiration from German October to influence his timeline. I see the merits of having multiple point divergences to get to a outdated version of this. Like, this is an outdated version of the map, but getting to this result is pretty good. I can understand that, and it could lead to a really interesting scenario for that reason. So I like that. It's not my... I find it hard for myself to do multiple points of divergences, because I am more of a fan of the journey of using history to get to a certain point. But then again, if you're trying to make this into a Hoi 4 mod, which is what I know is happening with Clashing Eagles, if you're trying to make it into a Hoi 4 mod, the lore doesn't matter as much as it would if you're trying to make a story that's using alternate history, in my view, or supposed to be focused on alternate history. Is the scenario leads to an interesting conflict and enjoyable Hoi 4 gameplay experience, then the lore doesn't matter that much. So with that all being said, the lore that is established with the 3 points of divergence makes sense. And I think that it's pretty good. I like the way that it flows, I suppose. Yeah. I don't have too much else to say, and we have a lot more to go through. But I appreciate that this was submitted, and I'm glad to feature it. So thank you very much, Inferno. So the next one I'm going to cover is one that doesn't have many upvotes, but I put it on the thumbnail, so I need to cover it, right? So I haven't gone through I think I actually did read it all. I could be wrong, but I just, at one point, my eyes kind of glazed over, because the point of this timeline is supposed to be that there's an after Cold War went hot scenario. Long summary. Hold on. So Beria is there, and he gets to be there. The USA collapses. Economic crash. Okay, this causes national conservative parties, and okay, the U.S. spiraled into civil war after a failed coup attempt. Okay, so the end goal that they're going for is a USA that failed in the Cold War and has a civil war in 2000 plus, right? Fair enough. That's pretty clear even with the thumbnail here. Not the thumbnail, the logo. But I have a problem here. So, like, immediately, so let's look. The provisional government emerges victorious in the Kingdom of Greece, letting King Paul's Greece government to evacuate to Crete, leading to a Taiwan-esque situation. Okay, fair enough. So, I'm pretty sure this is the communists in Greece succeeding. This would go against what was agreed upon in the Varna Peace Conference. There was a conference that was held where Stalin, FDR, and Churchill all got together. I think a French guy showed up too, and they agreed to spheres of influence in Europe. And Britain was meant to have been guaranteed influence in Greece. This is why Stalin didn't support the partisans there, right? So you can have them succeeding instead, or like having Stalin be more proactive. That's fine. And it leads to interesting things later on. But one of the things that I found to be a little odd was, it was the Yalta Peace Conference. Thank you. 1948. The Berlin airlift ends in I can't talk. The Berlin airlift ends in catastrophe when, believing them to be American bombers, the USSR shoots them down. This gives Stalin carte blanche to fully take over Berlin. I disagree. If there were American planes shot down by the Soviets, there would be war. That's like World War III right there. The reason why the USSR and the German communists didn't shoot down those planes, despite it going over their country, is because they knew that if they engaged, there would be a war, right? So that's a good setup for a World War III, not for a USA collapse timeline. Like, you could get rid of this and then still have what you want. You don't need to get rid of West Berlin in 1948, right? Soviet Union invades Turkey. Okay, another one. Turkey joined the Allies right at the tail end of the conflict, so it's kind of like whatever. But they threw in their lot with the USA and Allies by the very end. The USSR invading Turkey? Like, no, they wouldn't invade, right? Like, if they invaded a country that was supposed to be their ally soon after the war ended, like, the USSR doesn't have the capability to do that because of how much they were screwed over by the Germans, treating their entire country like fertile colonization ground, right? Like, no, that doesn't make any sense, right? I just don't agree with that. I know that Stalin wanted to have the Montreux Convention, whatever. He wanted to have control over the Straits so that he could have more influence in the Mediterranean. But in order to keep peace, that didn't happen because the Greece thing. But if you're already having Greece having a successful communist revolution, then the precedent for them to be able to pressure Turkey is a lot more significant, and that's reasonable to have. But I don't think it should have Turkey be invaded. If Turkey gets invaded, then that's another World War III, right? Like, the Cold War only really became cold because of the decisions that the Soviets took to not provoke the West when both sides were reeling with economic hardship. And I would say it's not really controversial to claim that the USSR had a lot worse of a economic issue to deal with than maybe the USA, where they never had any of their factories blown up by an invading force, right? That's why the Marshall Plan was able to revitalize Western European industries, because the USA's industrial base was so powerful, right? Let's see. What else do we have here? Hungarian Revolution leads to the creation of the Hungarian SSR versus the USSR. Is Stalin dies, Barry is left. Okay, so Stalin wanted there to be a bunch of buffer states between the USSR and the West. That's why it wasn't Polish SSR, Romanian SSR, blah blah blah. That's why they didn't do that. First of all, it would be really unstable. If you have a Hungarian revolution then causing a integration, so you have a population that just revolted against your rule, so you're going to annex them? Like, I appreciate the boldness, and I would like to see timelines where the USSR expands its influence beyond the former Russian imperial territory, because that's interesting, and their governmental system is compatible with, like, not needing to abide by conventional historical borders like the Russian empires, right? But there's just something about that doesn't really seem right to me. I don't know about this, but that's interesting. Civil war in Indonesia. Vietnam escalates. Fair enough. Prague Spring is half successful, splitting the country between a pro-American Czech Republic and pro-Soviet People's Republic of Slovakia. I don't know. Like, if you remove the Hungarian annexation, that makes more sense. I'm just trying to picture what the borders would look like, right? Because it's like they have the Carpathian Ruthenia, and then that's Hungary there. But then you have Czechoslovakia then bordered on several sides with the Soviet. If they annexed the Hungarians, why don't they annex Slovakia? Why do they have to have a People's Republic of Slovakia, right? Like, the amount of worms that this opens is a lot. So I would say get rid of the Hungarian annexation, even though I commend the novelty. Sino-Soviet War. USSR starts a nuclear bombardment. Okay, I didn't know that. Holy crap. The USSR nuking a fellow communist country over a border conflict. This is crazy, man. I need to take a sip of coffee just to process this. Okay. What's Able Archer? An all-out war against the members of the Warsaw Pact. NATO. What the heck? So NATO tries to F with something, and then the the able archers complete. The new governments of the ex-Soviet bloc are now loyal to NATO and the U.S. Take the fight to Moscow. Civil war is doing the job for NATO. Okay, so there's a Soviet civil war due to that's okay. You know, like for the things that I've claimed about this timeline and said that I don't like, I like that setup, right? There's a conflict in the Soviet structure that, due to the timing of it and the fact that it was Beria leading instead of a less Stalinist, like Khrushchev is not a Stalinist. Having Stalinism continue beyond than when it was necessary, you could argue, or whatever, leading to a civil war early in the Soviet Union, leading to NATO having more influence in Europe. You know, that's actually pretty interesting. I think that this is cool in the way that they have it done, right? Worst harvest berry. Okay, hold on. Okay. Suharto. Okay. Also, of course, collapse is on Palestine, another West. Okay. Getting to. Yeah. I don't know too much. Like, it's crazy. I don't know that much about modern history, so I don't know for sure. But there's different factions in the USA in their civil war. There's an interesting dynamic set up with the NATO controlling former Soviet bloc places, Soviet Union still having its core territory, and then that's an interesting, compelling scenario idea. I like it. Don't have Hungary be annexed by the USSR. Don't have the USSR nuke China over a border conflict. Like, any nukes dropping at any point against anybody should probably lead to, well, I mean, that's not true though. Like, why would the USA intervene to help a communist country that got nuked by another communist country? In fact, if anything, they'd be celebrating, right? And that's one of the reasons why they invaded NATO. And I guess, like, yeah, like having, I don't know, it kind of feels like I'm ruining the parade of having an interesting scenario because of its implausibility. Maybe keep the China nuke, right? Like, the reason why I don't prefer things like the Hungary annexation is because of the, like, precedent that it sets and the borders being weird. Yeah, like, I don't know. But this is an interesting timeline, and I commend Switzerland. I'm pretty sure that he just had that name for an NRP for sharing his timeline, so thank you to him. Okay, so now what do we do? Let's go. I'm not going to cover this one too much because of how crazy. No, I'm going to say crazy. What is it? Like, this is a summary. Like, this is supposed to be the quick summary. This is by Brazilian Mapper, I think. You can look that up. It's kind of like a project series. I haven't seen it myself. It's called Agadir, I think. Project Agadir. But here's the actual TLDR. World War I starts to the Agadir crisis. Half of Morocco submits to Germany, allied Spain. Italy invades Turkey, Italy and the Central Powers. Ottomans and the Allies. Balkan League goes to war in Central Powers. Bulgaria flips and Romania joins the Allies. Germany still bogged down on both fronts for years, eventually breaking to Russia. Spain undergoes a socialist revolution after 5 years of war. Russia does so as well. Italy has a brief schizo-nationalist arc before also succumbing, I guess, to socialist revolutions. Germany and France both fall under juntas and under increasingly hinged swear to win at all costs. Even worse, Brest-Litovsk for the Bolsheviks. Left SRs eventually overthrow them. That's interesting. A warlord era ensues, and I guess in Russia. Ottomans try betraying the Allies and explode instead. Yeah, that's funny. Austria, briefly informed of the United States of Greater Austria, completely explodes. At the end of the day, Iberia, Italy, and most of Pannonia are socialist, while Germans, the last offensive into France, fails, and both regimes collapse due to republicanism and socialism, respectively, leading no clear winners in the war after 7 years and 30 million dead. Except for maybe Persia and their wholesome semi-democratic Euphrates to Gobi bloc. Okay, so I think this is cool. Especially the way that it's summarized here. Zaporozhye, I'm a big fan of Zaporozhye. People's Republic of Turkey I wasn't expecting, but I guess that makes sense. Warlord period in Russia could be good. Iberian communes, I like that. I'm a big fan of a united Iberia, especially if it's socialist. This is all in another. It's a mod for something. Hold on. They're making a mod out of this. I just don't know what the game is. He has a YouTube channel, and you can see this entire timeline for yourself with more depth, and I would recommend that you guys watch that. I find this surprising, like a Japanese colony or something. Japan would have like a field day in this area. It could lead to a northern expansion doctrine. That's pretty good. Australian state. Because why'd that happen? Just because Britain had a revolution? Broken up Brazil is compelling. Like, this isn't something that I would have made. I probably would have had a different approach with an Agadir point of divergence. But it's not to say it's bad by any means. And because of the fact that they took this radical departure, you have a very, they have a world that's very ripe for an interesting conflict. There's a lot of socialists. If this was going to be like a Hoi 4 mod, just like taking something that I know for sure, this bloc and Austria and Hungary and Croatia and Slovenia all fighting, let's say, the biggest European power that they can, Germany. That's a lot. But imagine then Great Britain, well, maybe they don't like each other. Great Britain, Germany, Zaporoslavia, Ukrainian People's Republic, Southeast Union, Romania probably as well, Bulgaria too. They would all, well, maybe not, because Turkey would also invade here. So then it's like this, no, like that, all fighting this, which I guess makes sense. That could be an interesting front line for war. So not necessarily my cup of tea, but I can see how this is compelling, especially with a semi-independent Africa due to how much the war caused things. And yeah, the war goes on for a long time, especially if it's a World War One. It's a pretty long time. But yeah, it's an interesting scenario, and thank you for showing it. Krasnot. So this is something I made a lore grave on, and then Bonana here has made his own version of the scenario. So you can see things that I put in, like he has not the Elbe being the borderline, but this river instead. That makes it a little more balanced between the Germanys. The Fourth International of Mussolini totalists having their say here. I think there's a revolution here that happens along the lines that I had suggested in my Krasnot timeline. There's a divided Greece here, which I think is actually probably better than having it fully united under Greece, like a communist Greece. I think this is occupied by Russia to have Straits access, which leads to everything else here making a lot more sense. I don't know what this is, but that's interesting. Why is Romania independent? That's actually something that I did as a revision in my Krasnot timeline as well, where it's more compelling to have Romania try to avoid being subsumed into the Moscow Accord, but then getting partitioned by all these different things, right? But what else do we have here? So they have a divided Japan and split influence in Manchuria. Hold on. That Korea is a part of the East Asian United Front, which is supposedly in competition with the Eastern Syndicalist Union. So I'm sure they have a TLDR that I can look at to clarify things, but it could be a syndicalist totalist split, just like in Europe. Here we have France controlling the Rhine. I don't know why they would do that. Like, this is primary German territory. Like, they can't just annex that, right? Why is everything split? Because that makes for fun Cold War vibes. And then we have they have the Pact of Salvation with Brazil and France and some German colonies. I love that name. It's a really good name. Cairo Axis is a good call out to the way that it used to be called in early KR. No, I don't think it's a right KMT China when they have red color, so I don't know about that. And we have a Cordoba Accords here. I had Brazil like dominating the entire southern hemisphere. But this makes more sense. And then having American Revolutionary Front, having them own this as well, could lead to interesting conflicts. And then I think they kept the same sort of thing where there's an American deviation of syndicalism that causes them to not be with the Third Internationale, which then leads to potential conflict with them later. So yeah, I'm really flattered that this has been adapted at all from my thing. I'm glad they're taking the name Krasnat, getting a third competitor into the ring of successors. The only difference is that this one has maps, teasers that have been actually released within the year, so that's nice. No shade to Roses and Thorns and I think Meeside. I can't remember what the other one's called. Shadow of the Four Horsemen, right? No shade to them. Their lore is probably a lot more in depth. This looks to me like a pretty fun Hoi 4 mod, so I'm excited to see this. Is that? Oh yeah, that's a Guinea controlled by Brazil. Oh, and that's so cool. I like this. I like how there's like content here, this content here, this content here, this content in a Kaiserreich Cold War. Let's go. So let's look at the TLDR quickly. That's the TLDR? Okay, Jesus. Timeline. Anglo-Afghan War, Berlin stock. Okay, let's just skip the usual KR stuff. Bharatian victory in India. Spanish capture of Portugal. Capitulation of Belgium. U.S. military administration. United with the American Constitutional Climate. Okay. Canadian intervention in the Second American Civil War, but we know that they capitulate. Serbia occupies the stuff. They eventually become Yugoslavia. Polish nationalist coup. Yeah. Russian victory in Vilnius. Workers' Congress of America in the Second American Civil War. Czech Declaration of Independence. Capture of Vienna. Okay. All good stuff. Eureka Conference after the Second World War. That's cool. Indonesian rebellion, Middle Africa collapses. Yeah, the way that they actually mapped out Middle Africa collapsing is good. Russian nukes fall on Japan. Okay, cool. So we have that going on. Interesting. Did Russia then develop the nuke first? If so, that's interesting. Because I know that there's a lot of socialists that were involved in the Manhattan Project. So I would probably advise that the Internationale develops the nukes first. But I don't know. It could be way different. Radical socialist coup in Siam. Chinese invasion of socialist Siam. Siam joins the Eastern Syndicalist Union. Started the first Sino-Bharatian War. That's cool. I like that. Ceasefire in Congolese Civil War. Pro-Russian coup in Iran. Iran loses outer regions. Biafran Civil War. All events after 1950 or beyond are merely possible outcomes. So I guess the start date is 1950. Nyasaland take over Zambia. Congolese Civil War continues. East Africa War continues. Okay. Republic victory in Biafra. Indonesia victory against the Dutch. Oh, the Dutch still existed? Okay, interesting. Anti-CPRA. Okay, I don't know what that is. Congolese People's Republican Army, maybe. Peruvian Civil War. East Africa, Freistaat and Kenya defeat Uganda and Tanganyika. South Africa War. Death of Savankov. Yeah, so this is like really interesting stuff, and I'm really happy to see the timeline being expanded. Really awesome that this is being made into a mod. People might have had some choice critiques here, like, oh, it's not plausible, like the Egypt cannot have okay, whatever, like a French victory in the is not possible, also likely. Okay, interesting. Yes. But yes, somebody's arguing that there's actually more balance in the war, even though the Pact of Salvation is France's Catholic minority occupying an Islamic majority everywhere. versus a Islamic anti-imperialist faction. I don't know about that, but regardless, it's good content. And as I detailed in my Krasnacht Loregrave, there's a lot of cool things you can do with it if it's made like that. So, Krasnacht gets my stamp of approval, but I guess you would have already figured that given the fact that it's in the lower sub pact and stuff. I want to try to get some short ones quickly gone. So this is by Haas. I really like how it's alternate geography, but it's not like a completely new world. It's like, you know how Pangea was a thing and then the tectonic plates moved around? This kind of reminds me of that, and then maybe sea levels are higher, so you have different geography, which is pretty cool. Having a big China is interesting. Having Brazil manage to keep its identity while other places... I think Zhongguo is actually just how China refers to itself, so maybe that's fine. Nostramar, Francois Empire, interesting. Yeah, I really like... I don't know, there's something about this that I find really cool. Like, I doesn't try to like reinvent the wheel too much, and obviously the way that the topography and geography is depicted is really pretty, so I like this. The flags are good too. It's a powerful nation in Guaidu. Democratic convention, each state cooperates with each other. Cool. Yeah, if you guys want to look at this more, I recommend it. It's pretty cool. Zhongguo is how they refer to the country. Zhongguo, yeah, there you go. So it's just their native name. This was quickly mentioned by somebody. Evil PLC in World War II, they replaced Germany. Okay, interesting. It was like a Reichskommissariat of... Interesting. It's like a weird... Okay, no, they're annexing it? Okay. I'm a big fan of like Poland, Lithuania, Commonwealth timelines in general, just because I think that Polish history is really interesting, and to have a powerful nation in Central Europe that isn't Germany always leads to more interesting outcomes. I don't have too much of a... What is it? Termashov? Denikin. So this is like a Russia collaborator. Okay, but they're only... What? There's lore here, and I don't know. I have a lot. I'm kind of stressed trying to cover everything, right? Polish-French alliance. Yeah, Poland and France are our usual like natural allies all the time. That's the progression of the Soviet Union later collapsed to occupy next. Okay, I see. Point of divergence is right after the Great Northern War, the PLC beat the Russian Empire and ended up taking over most of the Baltic. Fast forward another century, Napoleon appears, the PLC becomes a Republican monarchy. Yeah, I know that the Polish had a weird relationship with calling their kingdoms monarchies. I mean, their kingdoms were republics. The last big event was the First World War. German Empire tried to invade the PLC, was defeated. At one point, Polish troops held Berlin, then the Russian Revolution. The Treaty of London is seen as the humiliation by the PLC and turned into an Italy. So here's the thing, like if they occupied Berlin, why would they withdraw, right? Like, why would what London says to do ever cause them to abide by it? It's like, we literally are occupying it. We can do whatever we want, right? That sort of peace I don't think would have lasted. I can respect the like trying to be an Italy thing, but I just don't think that Italian fascism would really work in a federative Poland-Lithuania. I don't know. Like, I can see the beginnings of something really interesting here, and I commend you for sharing. I just wish I could give more choice feedback or suggestions. So this is made by Finnish Jaeger, and he spent like all night doing this, so I feel bad. Yeah, and there's a lot of depth here. I feel bad because I'm not going to be able to give nearly as much depth here. Hold on, I want to check this out.
It's because Brits wanted to maintain the balance of power and Sweden threatened them too. I'm still working on it. Yeah, no worries, man. Like I could see if I could try to give more choice feedback. But we just have so much to cover, right? Okay, so this is Finnish Jaeger. He's big help on Talons and Twilight. He's detailing out a timeline where Finland's eastern territories, or not Finland's eastern territories, the Finno-Ugric regions that were dominated by the Novgorodian Republic, leading to their integration to the Russian Empire, is prevented by the Sweden starting their expedition into early Finland with more military presence, seizing a lot of territories from the pagan Finns, reaching far to the crusades from Oulu to Voiburg, causing more of the Karelians to finish leadership. Swedes under the saw opportunity to gain legitimacy. Okay, right. So basically, because Sweden's more successful, Finland exists larger. Big Finland. I can see how that would make sense. Practice feudalism. Okay, cities were established. Finland would grow, population strong, booming economy. So this is the thing that this is something that I saw happen with like if you know you know, there'd be this person who was really into Estonia in the community, and they would share maps, and it'd be like the Teutonic Order beats the Novgorodians and annexes Pskov, which leads to a bigger Estonia. It's like maybe not, considering what the Teutonic and Livonian orders were doing, like the fact that they like Riga was a German majority city. Like the way that Estonian nationality, nationhood, awakening, all that stuff would represent would be way different. There could be like, they could think that they're German, they're like Germanized enough, right? Like there's some things that you don't know for sure. And I know that the Teutonic Order's policies and all that stuff would be different than Sweden's, just an assumption, really. But I feel like there's a little bit too much benefit being given to Finland in a timeline where they were colonized, right? Like I don't know. Like there's something to be said about Swedish presence avoiding Russian presence in the region. But then what if then instead of Arkhangelsk and the trade that was exuded from there, like what if these cities that Finland was growing, what if there's a lot of Swedes there, right? Like could lead to the entire Finland peninsula, whatever that region is called, having more of a kinship with the Scandinavians. And then would Finland really have that much of a cultural difference, right? They mentioned something about like an autonomous region. But if it really did end up leading Finland to have so much influence over, or like so much population growth, would the Swedes even allow that to continue? But then if they try to stop it, then there's a Finnish national revolution. Hold on, let me just try to quickly read over here. He goes really in depth here, even to like the Soviet Union and things like that. And again, my usual cutoff for alternate histories is 30 years of divergence. Otherwise, okay, hold on, sorry. I should have kept reading. Hold on, where was it? Oh man, I lost my spot. Finland, more population students. This proposal, okay. Finnish language was so clear, yeah. Finnish populations and fodder to the Danish, yeah. Finnish sonic custom, constant things and firewood, okay. Swedification, bringing Swedish populations, immigrants in Finland, different context. The idea was to kill two birds with one stone. On one hand, the people suffering from overpopulation. On the other hand, hard labor could be turned into the diet of Sweden. So the case of the Swedish language in Finland is favorable. Yeah. The proponents of this matter saw the ratio possible. Swedish state was still Swedification would cause the rise of the Fennoman movement, beginning Finnish nationalism. Right. Swedish now. The Hats rise to the power, the Russophobic foreign policy, which was disadvantage of Finland after an attack against Russia and the White Hands were erupted. The justification was to take lost territories of the Russians. The Swedish invasion would turn into a grinding stalemate, eventual peace, no signs of territories. Due to occupation of southern Karelian regions and repatriations to Russia, Finnish population grew sentiment over the pointless conflict. Okay. So the demographics there are different, but then the fact that they failed in the war leads to more Finnish nationalism. Autoral Franco region. Russia conquered most of southern Finland. Kizumio mistakes in the loss of Finland. So this is the thing I like about this timeline. It's definitely not a Finland's the protagonist timeline because of how for several centuries they would be continued to be dominated by Sweden, and you can see clearly here that they're facing disadvantages for being the subject of Sweden. So I respect that, and that's really grounded, and I appreciate that a lot. Russia comes down to Finland. Yeah, so Grand Duchy of Finland, Russian autonomous state. So I'm just going to see the Russia. Grand Duchy of Finland was formed as an autonomous state under Russia, allowed to retain territories. The map at the beginning. All Finnish soldiers and Swedes were repeated. So yeah, so Russia takes Finland and then goes like, hey, we can use the fact that they want to be separate from Sweden to our advantage. But then cracks are already showing. Finland, it's just further increasing Finnish nationalism. Finland. Alexander planned to call a diet of states. Finland experienced a period of liberalization. Finns felt too good to be true. Convened the diet. Finland was Prussia. A growing tension in Finland. Russification. Okay. Finland. Alright. So I'm gonna have to get going on, but this is really good, man. And Finland becomes independent. That's cool. I'm probably going to read this on my own time if I can, but I really like the way that it gradually moves towards this outcome, and the single point of divergence doesn't cause anything else anywhere else to make no sense. It still has most of the same events happening as our history. The fact that Russia used Finland as a way to try Finnish nationalism as a way to try to neutralize Sweden makes sense. Finland has more time to get its own national identity. This is all really good stuff. I can see why you were so passionate about it and writing it down here. So here's the TLDR. Finland gets colonized by Sweden. Finland remained an autonomous republic during its early years. Remaining independent in World War II, becoming armed militarized neutrality. Finland decided policy of armed neutrality lasting into the Cold War. Finnish foreign policy mirrors our timeline counterpart with a more strong dominant presence. Okay. St. Petersburg is relocated to a merchant city. Most of the world history did not change this time. Yeah, that's good. But Russian Baltic Sea ambitions were reduced due to Arkhangelsk becoming the main port of Arctic. Okay, instead of like Kola or whatever it was. Other than a handful of Finnish soldiers wreaking havoc in locations. Treaty of Paris is never signed due to the Soviet total defeat, and appeasement to maintain neutral Finland. Okay, allowing Finland to operate in their submarines. For militarized society in the Winter War, total victory against the Soviet Union leads to a new wave of national pride, which makes sense too because it's like a bunch of regional things coming together. Due to increasing Fed policies and competency of Sweden growing nationalism, Finland blah, 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 blah. Hi chat. This scenario is a version with a lot of boring stuff being omitted due to this version due to time constriction. One major omission is Finland's interest in Estonia. Yeah, this is one of the best written timelines. I definitely agree. Even the way that like it quickly explains things without getting too bogged down in the details. This is really good stuff. So thank you for submitting this, Finnish Shaker. Loredad's stamp of approval. Okay, what do we got here? There's this one which is really good. 10 out of 10. How do you even pronounce it? Period, right? There, done. Good lore, plausible. What do you guys want to see, chat? You guys can look at the thing yourself, and we can. Oh yeah, this is something I really wanted to look at. The Fried Core's legacy. So this person messaged me independently, trying to get my feedback. I didn't have time to respond to it, and this person's asking for feedback is another reason why I wanted to do this stream. So you can thank Nico here. But basically, from what I understand, it's like a cat putsch successful. Yeah, Vienna. Okay, I'll check that out soon. What was the title of that one? That'll be the next one. An Ottomans that conquered Hungary in Vienna. I want to take a look at that. Don't worry about that. So there's a coup here leading to a German empire, Freikorps Germany, which is like interesting that it's the Freikorps, right? Because the Freikorps were like just like nationalist anti-communist volunteers without any specific ideology. So then having them run a Germany is interesting. I don't know if they cover what would happen if it was Hans von Seat running it. I think a Hans von Seat putsch makes more sense than a Freikorps one. And if there was a Freikorps one, I don't know what they would really do, and I'm sure this would be elaborated here, but if I were to do something like this, just quickly before I try to read this, you have the Hans von Seat putsch succeed. You don't even need to do the German October thing where he does an invasion of Poland without the approval of the Reichstag or the League of Nations, and just have him take over the country anyway. He even had plans like, if this happened, if there was a war with France, potentially even for him coupping the government, he would have set up a fortification line on the Elbe, not in the Rhineland, not like all the way to like basically Berlin, and then the rest of Germany would be partisan against France. That's interesting. I might make my own timeline about that. But I don't know, the Freikorps like having a coup. Let's see here. Yeah, so there's no TLDR, unfortunately. So Cap Putsch succeeds. He dies. Ludendorff in his hardline conservative faction. Ludendorff died. Okay. Ludendorff's counter coup. Ludendorff failed to neutralize the leader of the ruling government. So because of all these things, it leads to a Freikorps. But another thing that is interesting that I don't really agree with from a point of divergence standpoint is conspiracy, German Reich and Social Democratic Republic. Germany had recently experienced attempted revolution by the Spartacists. So you can't get rid of this Spartacist revolution failing because that's how the Freikorps existed. So that makes sense. The government created the paramilitary unions, young anti-communists. Units, it's not only young people. I'm pretty sure they were veterans too. Units crushed the uprising and killed its leaders. Was it the Freikorps that killed Rosa Luxemburg? I thought it was like the Black Reichswehr. Regardless, it doesn't matter. German right still leading the structured liberal democracy. They tried, and as a result, they organized a coup d'etat February 9th, 2020. 1920. German right. Coup 1920. This could have been Seat or any other putsch, not necessarily the far right. General Walther von Lüttwitz demanded that President Friedrich Ebert and Defense Minister halt their troop reductions, dissolve parliament, and allow the president to be elected directly by the people. Ebert rejected demands and did a coup. So how many coups are there? It feels like there's like 3 coups. Pseudo-Nazism under Ludendorff is interesting, yeah, I suppose. Seat the legalistic guy? Yeah, he was. But he did have he did form a Black Reichswehr, I think. And it was like a secret Reichswehr parallel to the state army. So he wasn't necessarily that legalistic. Or whatever. What else do we have here? There was something about... So they did Freikorps coup, Erbert and they were lead capital. Wolfgang Kapp said he was chancellor, defense minister. Government officials in Berlin refused to obey the new regime and called for a general strike. This is the thing I don't really agree with. Many communists still resented the Freikorps for the murder of Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. Influential voices in the Communist Party urged workers not to participate in this strike. That does not make sense to me. I don't know when Lenin died. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But internal political instability by capitalist infighting would absolutely lead to socialists being like, let's take over the government. And German communists hated Karl Liebknecht for his, what was it, Karl Liebknecht? Friedrich Ebert. They hated Friedrich Ebert for his social democracy collaboration with capital. His moderate supporters now don't have a leader to go for unless, it's like less... Because he got couped, there may be people who are like more pro Friedrich Ebert, but then there could be a lot of people being like, this all happened because we didn't have a revolution anyway. So if anything, the fact that the Freikorps killed them would lead them to revolt, right? Like, Lutwitz marched against the Freikorps brigades, but because the communists don't like the Freikorps, they don't strike. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like that, hi Callie. Yeah, I don't. This is not particularly good lore. I'll just be blunt. So it's just like somehow writing off the communist response. So Wolfgang Kapp make moves. Open negotiations with diplomats from Soviet Russia seeking military. What? Liebknecht was USPD. Yeah. So I missaid Liebknecht. I meant Friedrich Ebert. I said Liebknecht when I meant Friedrich Ebert. Philip Scheidemann. Okay. I'm just processing this right now. So this paragraph, it's like you are close to having something that would make sense, but you just instead have Hans von Seet leading because he was already collaborating with Russians, right? Like, I don't know if this person's seen German October or my lore grave on Red Vistula. But you could do that instead, and then you would get that result. But then again, like, I don't know, like you just... Because they eventually have a situation where they... Oh, excuse me. Because they have a situation where Poland still exists with all of its territory, this section is just not really that relevant. You know? Like, I don't know, man. There's just a lot here that I don't get. Oh, man. Ernst Röhm. Wait, who's Röhm? Okay. German tremendous success. Soviet leadership agreed that Soviet Union regime. Moscow increased demanded large compensations and like there's just some aspect to this that I don't get. Like, the Soviet Union would not just collaborate with militarists, like they collaborate with the Nazis. So maybe it isn't too far-fetched. But I think what is far-fetched is that they just saw like 2 or 3 different ways that they could have had a communist Germany, and they just don't pursue it. And this is before Stalin took over and had his policy of like let's let Germany ravage Europe so that we can march in, because there was plans for him to invade Germany after. So it's just like it's like a confusion of the historical dynamics at the time to try to make an interesting scenario, which I can commend. I just don't think that this is the right way to do it. Ludendorff argued Germany's dependence on the Union became intolerable. So hold on, I gotta repeat this now. New figure was Rom. So Romreich, okay. Rom says should be expanded. Rom and Ludendorff 36 uncertain condition. So let's look at what they're trying to get to, right? Yeah, Rom is the SA guy. Yeah, I know. Ludendorff repents the old officer elite. Rom from the Freikorps. The regime was mediocre condition. Germany existed powerful, but its economy was strained. Living standards deteriorating. The ruling coalition was increasingly divided. Litwitz wants to retire. He doesn't have a successor. Ambitious figures circle the government. Ludendorff and the old guard. Rom is populists. So, having Rom be influential in the state is interesting. But then where's Hitler, right? Like, having a Rom that isn't influenced by Hitler being influential in Freikorps is interesting. It wouldn't be really the Freikorps anymore if it's a Germany that isn't abiding by the Treaty of Versailles. They're trying to get the Treaty of Versailles not being enforced again by a French invasion by having the Soviets collaborate with them. But they're also having Poland exist in a large state. This Poland barrier is preventing the Soviets from having reliable support and supply to Germany. If the British and French wanted to enforce the Treaty of Versailles or even put something harsher on Germany, regardless of whether or not the Soviets are participating, they can just sail navies into the Baltic and then prevent them from getting supply, and then they just get trounced because the army was reduced. Like, that's why I don't think this really makes sense. You would need to have Poland die, but then if you have Poland die, then the Soviets would have way more influence on the communists in Germany, which is why I'm just leaning towards my version of Red Vistula, where Germany exists. It has a military wing that's just kind of like, okay, fine, you know what, whatever. You're the new frontier against the Bolshevism, so you get to have an army again. That's how you can get similar dynamics of the leaders here that you want for your 1936 scenario, with alternate borders that lead to an interesting conflict without this hand waving of like I just really can't get over the Freikorps take over Germany, but because the communists don't like the Freikorps, they don't participate in the strike. Like, am I misreading it? I don't understand. Regardless, there's potential here, especially the dynamic where there's this, like, as somebody said, a pseudo-Nazism under Ludendorff leading to IRL Nazis to adapt things, having Soviet influence in the state, and then having people who want to, like, continue the Soviet collaboration. All that stuff is good. And it mirrors our history because of the way that Soviets and Germany collaborated to partition Poland. And then having a different method of... wait, this is actually historical? The Communist Party do this? No way. The communists were like, don't strike? What? Okay, oh my god. What can I Google about that? There's so many stupid decisions that the communists made. Understatement of the century. But, it's hard to leave. Gotta go. Have a good day. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe we could. I don't know. We'll see how this goes, but I'm liking how this is going content-wise so far. Okay, enough delaying. Where's that Ottoman Vienna timeline. Oh, is election time? But okay, but they wouldn't have an election if it's a enforced military. You know what I mean? Like yes, historically they didn't do that, but now you're having a military coup. Like they would strike. Like this is the exact thing that like Lenin even detailed in his thesis, the two-stage revolution, right? No, it's not Under the Black Sun. That's not the Ottoman one. That's the alternate world. That's the period one. Harmony Under Heaven, Martial Vision. These are good ones too. Multipolar Europe. Encore Europe. That's an interesting one. This one's interesting, and there's good lore here, but I'm not really good at giving feedback for this sort of stuff where it's just pure fiction. I like the way that the map looks. I like the alternate geography. It's not implausible for me. Balance given to the world. There we go. Let me look for it. Terminal Century, Quintuple War, Britain Eagle, Mosva, original scenario, Red Tsunami, fictional map, Bruder Krieg, Adagira, Consular Europe, Clashing Eagles, Revolutionary, Multipolar Europe, Blood and Talon, Hispanica, Harmony Under Heaven, Maximilian Robespierre. There we go. Thank you. So this is by Sogut Falk. This guy was pivotal in our attempts to revive In the Name of the Tsar, this really cool solution to the Ottoman issue. So I appreciate your help a lot. So let's go here. So the timeline is thought experiment, successful siege of Vienna, Ottoman dominance in Central European wares. Siege cannon, reinforcements lacking the first siege with supply problems, be conquered. Ottoman Hungary be safeguarded. The Vienna administration also be given to the Hungarian March. Okay. It'd be theorized until 1836. That's quite the... there's a lot of years to cover. Like 307? That's a lot. Doesn't claim to be historically accurate. Yeah, fair enough. So they conquered it. Treaty of Milan. This is what it would look like. Okay. Ottoman Hungary. Makharistan be giving March status. Egri, Burgund, Vardat, Marcin, and Iliet given to the Hungarian March. And the newly established Iliet of Nemse. Jonas, Givaldi, Sultan, Doom resources. Yeah, so any Ottoman conquest of Vienna timeline needs to have a big Hungary. If you're going to have, because they somehow they managed to handle this, right? And it's a bunch of Orthodox. Having a independent Hungary Catholic and then having it be conquered by Islam, they need to have their own big march, right? And then that way you're able to actually take over and hold on to Vienna too. So that's like a must. So I commend them for this. This makes a lot of sense. Not March to fill its province siege. HRE would try to establish a coalition toward Vienna. The population is present. I respect this as a, like, you can't, we need to try to circumvent things somehow. Diets to reinstate loyalty. Charles is given the majority of Protestant demands cooperated with the Schmaldeck League. So this is like, because they can't be divided now that Vienna's fallen, the Protestant Reformation happens differently. You know, that's actually pretty interesting. The plan in 1529 was simply to prop up Hungary in a similar way to the Wallachia and Moldavia marches. So this is fairly accurate. Okay, cool. Starting this construction of the Little Palanova. So make the Italian duchies the Pope in favor of the invasion. Ottoman ally on paper, Venice and other Italian German legal set new. Yeah, fair enough. So then they fight the Safavids. Okay. long Turkish War. The death of Jonas the First and his sister on the Hungarian throne, the Holy Roman Empire would use this transitional period to begin their prepared march against the Ottoman Empire, the largest army Italy ever gathered to that date. That makes sense and it's pretty cool. Ottoman Empire and Hungarian march should have prepared the fortified city. City itself was transformed. Nimsa, so the Ottomans win. Battle of Temesvar, yeah, it's still called the Crusade after the Venetians. So it's just like a continued fight. Okay. But who wins? Christians and the long Turkish War significant the empire's peak for years to come. Yeah, so the Ottomans win. One of the rivals capturing the second Rome was enough to Suleiman to see state resources thin with vast battles. At Friday prayer at the city of Rome. Wait, he conquered Rome? Holy crap. The Pope offers an audience to the Sultan. He surrendered ownership of Croatia, Venice, Italy, in the city of Rome was be usurped by Charles V. Other pretender of the crown given to Kaiser Sultan. Whoa. Crazy. Talk about Mehmet's ambition, right? That's interesting. There's a lot going on here. And then, yeah, two popes. Yeah, there'd be a pope that collaborates with the Ottomans and then an anti-pope that would. That makes sense. Southeast Asia. Oh my god, okay. This is quite the Turkish timeline. And I find it interesting. I don't know if overextending into Hungary would really lead to all these other victories. But this does play like my usual Ottoman campaigns in EU4. So, fair enough. I haven't really conquered Rome in my Ottoman games, though. Ottoman victory in Hungary and then occupation of Rome. Mehmet's ambition. There was a time where, after the Ottomans conquered Byzantium, people were recognizing the Ottomans as a successor to the Roman Empire. And it's argued that one of the sultans had even considered trying to reconquer Rome under an Islamic rule, which is really interesting. There's an EU4 achievement called Mehmet's Ambition, where before 1500, not 1500, maybe 1550, like within 100 years, you need to conquer all the states of Rome, like including England, right? Like you have to control all of the Roman Empire, which is like, it sounds crazy, but they like the Ottomans have special mechanics. We don't have to worry about too much. But you know, this is interesting. I would definitely give this a read, but there is an element of like when you have 300 years of history, and then it's just like Turkey wins every time. It's like, it's not really the most interesting timeline for me. I can appreciate the effort that was put into this and the way it was written, and the plausibility of certain things is pretty good. It would be interesting to see how the rest of the world reacts to a successful annexation of Vienna by the Ottomans. But this doesn't seem like it's really a timeline that explores that, and it's more of a like, what if the Ottomans like dominated, which is an interesting scenario on its own as well. So I would recommend this for sure. Suleiman's bureaucracy directly calls Charles, "You are not the emperor, I am the Kaiser. You are just the kingdom of Vienna. The succession of Rome was not a forgotten tradition." Interesting. This reminds me in Antebellum, where Sicily... It's 1500, that's crazy. You have less than 50 years. No, 56 years. Antebellum, where Sicily, being Islamic, can go and conquer Rome. Yeah, that's cool. I haven't really seen much of Antebellum. So the War of the Popes makes sense because there's like there would be a separate pope that's established. It would be interesting to see how the Protestants react to that. Like, it could be that Protestantism gets more powerful when it's obvious that the Pope in Rome is collaborating with the Islam, you could have like most of Europe go Protestant. That could be an interesting thing. Counter Reformation. Yeah, I can see France trying to use Catholic stuff to like redo it. I can see Germany going full Protestant. Unstable mess. Yeah. The war ended prematurely with the French side's realization that Venetian defenses across Italy would fast. Okay. No Holy Grail in sight in the French Italy continent. This seems dire. Use the Ottomans to both suggest that the invasion. Yeah, so like France would be able to benefit a lot from this series. What if everything went perfect with the Ottomans? I'll have to look at that possible history video. The Polish-Lithuanian Union would shatter with Lithuanian nobility's defection towards Orthodox Russia? No, I don't think so. Lithuanian Protestants, what? This is result in the establishment of the Swedish-Polish Commonwealth, okay. Rage against Orthodox, okay. Swedish Orthodox, yeah, that's interesting. Bohemian, Bavarian, Austrian lands would get raided across Ottoman borders and anti-Treaty coalitions. Graz would be lost to the Ottomans. Okay. So they're just getting more and more of that region. England's unique position would be tested. French alliance and dropped due to feuds and geopolitical reasoning. Sparked the act of supremacy. Established Anglicanism, yeah. Danes would be the head of the new leaders of the Protestant... Yeah, okay. 40 Years' War, okay. Malay and Achaia would guarantee Muslim. Interesting. Yeah, so that's my feedback on that. I don't have too much else to comment on this. European Union. Whoa, what? European Union in 1836 is crazy. Pan-Saxon movement? Yeah, there's a lot here that's cool. I don't know how much else I can really add to this right now. I still have to like process it. I'll see if I can add more things to this scenario when I can. I think I could do maybe one or two more timelines before I need to like chill out, because this is a lot. This is pretty intense. Being able to having to do a lot of constant and meaningful feedback for all these timelines. So what else do we have here? We've covered Agadir. We've covered... Well, we can just admire this map. Where, like, there's no resurgent kingdom of Prussia. The Austrian Empire still exists. This is a good map. Austria annexes Silesia. Good for them. Prussia is neutered. Rhineland gone. Saxon borders are close. Couldn't cover great power. So, because of this, there wouldn't really be a unified Germany, right? Krieg. Prussia's further humiliated. Prussia ceased relations with Russia. Yeah, this is an interesting timeline. There's too much. There's not too much. Not too much to cover here, or at least not that I understand. But I like the way that this works. It makes for a good Victoria II campaigns, and having a Russia that works with Prussia to then fight with each other, that could lead to an interesting World War One. So I think this is what like the like there is a Hoifer mod that is like this, like I think it's also called Bruderkrieg or something, where Austria wins the Brothers' War, but they don't unite Germany like they do in Lux Germania. So that's good stuff. So Inferno advises for Encore of Europe and Under the Black Sun. I'm gonna do Under the Black Sun just because there's maps. Yeah, I don't like the Black Sun logo, so I'm trying not to show that on stream. USA, Great Depression, yeah, so no battle burn. Germany focuses on things of the east. They falls there. So separate Brittany is interesting. Two Frances is interesting. I think that was actually a German ambition at one point. I don't know if that's like gonna resolve differently or something. Remember that people keep forgetting all these used to be colonies, right? These not so much, but these used to be the colonies. So I think people don't really get that. Final act of the Second War. Japan took Hawaii. American week landed in Alaska. Germany took Greenland and the Azores and planning for invasion in North America, but the U.S. and Canada won't surrender. They landed in Canada. Time to go back to the atomic question. Yeah, the USA had nukes in 1945, but the UK... Yeah, so, well, whatever. The lore doesn't really matter that much. It's just Nazis win, right? Man, I can't really show this stuff on stream because it's showing swastikas and stuff, right? Like, I can't really show this. So, Japan and the Philippines, there's insurgencies here, but they get crushed, okay? Communists, fascists, and... I think this is a little weak. I don't think that there'd be this sort of ideological divide in India. I don't think communists would be able to have any sort of say. If they did, it would just be working with anti-imperialists, and then they would work together in a democratic fashion. They wouldn't fight like this, I don't think. Like, this is kind of like Hoi forebrained. Like, if I had to be honest, like the three ideologies in a civil war. Like, no, I don't really approve of that. Russia after the war collapsed, split in warlord states. The most important: Euro Republic, Soviet Omsk, USSR successor state, Sardom and Chita. Another effing swastika. Okay. Tokyo loyalists. Okay. Russian army. Russian dark state. Dark, so not important. Ideology secret. What? Yeah, I want your feedback on something, but this is a secret ideology. That's crazy. But this is monarchist. This is not... This border makes sense because that's what they wanted to do with the Urals. I don't get what this is. It's a little weird. This is a Soviet successor state. This is for, Russian, Japanese collaborators. Yeah, Warlord Russia makes sense. This is like Man in the High Castle, and Man in the High Castle isn't particularly known for its plausibility. The way that TNO has America being divided among RKs and Goring's path, which they removed, gosh dang it, is that there's a Pacific right RK, and then there's like a Canadian thing, I think, and then there's an American like free empire when it's not free. The reason why they did it this way is because the majority of German settlers that came to America settled in the north, while the south had slaves. So then there's people that live there that aren't quote unquote Aryan, and then they need to be Reichskommissariated, while the free American empire can be quote unquote free because they're like good enough racially. So I would say that you need to divide the USA along those lines more. This doesn't make much sense to me, only having this. Turkestan is a German protectorate. Oh, okay, there's a total access directory timeline. So there you go. I think Iberian Union is overused. Here's the really interesting thing about TNO. They removed Atlant-Ropa because it's implausible, but then they keep the Iberian Union. Why did they keep the Iberian Union? The entire point of that, it was supposed to be that they're like banding together to resist German things, so they still have that, fair enough. But then the argument, the most solid argument I have is like, oh, well, it would remove too much gameplay if they removed the Iberian Union. It's okay, well, like, we don't have to get into the whole Atlant-Ropa thing again, but there's no need for a Iberian Union in this timeline. You could just have Spain and Portugal exist. And Bandicate, I think this is the original author. Iberia collapses later in TNO or in here, because if it collapses later, it's like You could have just done that with Spain already existing. You know, like you could just have, if you really want to go deep with it, you could have a Reichskommissariat Iberia, and you could have the volunteer like Azul division be the people leading the Arche, right? Spain invaded Portugal in World War II. I don't think that makes sense. Spain was just recovering from a civil war. The Portuguese supported the Spanish in the Civil War. The Franco and Portugal both had signed agreements to not fight each other, specifically because Franco's regime was so weak and they didn't want to be involved in the Second World War. Portugal joined the Allies. If you joined the Allies, then sure, then that makes sense. But then why would Spain join the war? You can have Portugal joining the war, but then why would Spain join it? Like, did Spain agree to German demands to allow them to suppress Portugal and join the Axis in response in with the agreement that they'd be getting all the territories that they just got on the map, like Morocco? That makes sense, and I can agree to that. That makes more sense there than it would otherwise. But then, like, it's like a puppet of Germany. But later on in the map, you have it depicted as a part of the Italian sphere. That I don't find that to be particularly reasonable. If it's Germany who wants to get Portugal so they can get the Azores so they can do this, Germany is the one calling the shots in Spain, not Italy. Hold on. Both are allies and Portugal attack them, knowing Spain would attack. German pressure for Gibraltar. Yeah, I can see Germany taking Gibraltar. I can see they have the Azores, which is like, yeah, Spain would keep its islands, sure. It's free closer to Italy. I don't agree with that. That's just my opinion. Like, if I was going to be doing this sort of thing, Germany would be overlordship over Spain. Like, go full, and then have Italy be like even more oppressed. Right now, it's like, oh, you want Italy to have an ally because otherwise Italy is going to be completely dominated by Germany. But yeah, that's the entire point of what German ambitions were. Especially if, oh, they took Sweden. Oh my god. Okay. All right. I'm not really a big fan of Axis victory timelines anyway. So I'm a little biased in that way, I suppose. These like colonies of Africa make sense given the history. France keeping some colonies but not all, like this one, I don't really get. If I were to do this, I would have Germany dominating Spain. Like maybe even like Reichsprotectorate Iberia, really play up into it. Have France be, I don't know, something different. Have Italy be subjugated in some way potentially. But having Italy have Spain as an ally doesn't make much sense. Because we're already suspending disbelief that Germany would be able to manage all of this. And Sweden and Norway. And Britain's divided up and somehow that's managed. And they have these areas all... Oh yeah. You have Quebec without Quebec City. Like, what is this? Quebec City is like here. The majority French regions of Canada even bleed into Ontario. This is not a good protectorate of Quebec. You also have the Quebec side of the other side of this river controlled by a Anglo-dominated thing here. No, like this, if you want to have a Quebecois separate state, you would divide it differently. Yeah, that's fine. It's not as important as the other stuff in Axis Victory Time. I'm just pointing that out for you. Warlords, fine. Japan, I guess these are all Japanese dominions, fine. Italian dominance in Middle East is always interesting stuff. You could, if you really wanted to go full Axis victory, what I would say is Germany influences Spain. Spain invades Portugal, annexes it, gets Spain. Okay, but then France just gives Spain all this territory. Why? Like they're collaborators. There had to be some sort of fight after that, right? Like the Vichy France. This is the thing that people don't get about Vichy France. According to like, it's so hard to explain. The way you see it in Hoi 4 and the way it's represented in history is that Germany occupied a portion of France while the rest of France just sat around doing nothing. And that was a collaboration regime that didn't want to be involved in the war anymore. But at the time, what the idea was that France, quote unquote, Vichy France, was the only French government. There were French exiles that didn't want to be collaborating with Germany that made the Free French Resistance movement under de Gaulle. They were in Britain. They were working with Britain. Britain refused to surrender. Germany kept trying to get Britain to surrender, but they refused to. If Britain had surrendered, then Vichy France would have just been the only France, and the German occupation of northern France, which was justified for them to need to be able to administer the region, to be able to do the war with France, like the Battle for Britain and stuff, that wouldn't have existed. In this timeline, it's very clear that this still happens. There's still a war with Britain, that's fine. But Vichy itself, if Vichy was told that it needed to concede even more territory despite already succumbing to German dominance over their capital city, they would resist. There would be a further incursion. And I think that's what they actually do have already, because given how much Italy has. But like, I don't think that it should be represented with this blue color. And then it also further goes to my point. If Germany was trying to get Spain under its sphere, they would need to be fighting Vichy France again. So this Vichy France would be like, there'd be no French collaboration with Germany, and there would be a much different Africa because of that. I don't know. There's a lot of potential here, and I have a lot to say. And yes, as he mentioned, this is still like a work in progress sort of thing. But yeah, I think I've covered this enough. Hopefully you appreciated that feedback. Yeah, I don't know. I just not too particularly enthused with the way that things are divided like that. What else do we have here? I like these little diagrams here. This is about if Habsburg stayed on the throne in Spain. Goes all the way to 1950, included other divergence points, main one being a German-led Austria after the 1848 revolutions inspired by the aftershocks, Tuscany-led Italian Federation, Swedish victory in the Great Northern War, and dissolved the USA. Okay, very interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of different pods here. I'm sure this is good, and I want to check it out, but I don't know if I have the time. It also, for viewer... Oh, here. What, maps. There's mappies. Mapperinos. What is this map? Foreign policy. Birth of the infant. Okay. Turn of the century. King Cleveland, the king would be unable to have children. This led to an alternate, succession war. Charles's reign characterized the duality of the king. Somebody said that is this AI generated? Honestly, it might be. They say not, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm just not gonna cover this one. Encore of Europe. Okay, let's take a look at Encore of Europe. This is another one. It's a very big timeline by Occam. So I'll just read the TLDR because I'm kind of running out of steam. Oscar Podriak is killed instead of Franz Ferdinand. The July crisis occurs, but thanks to Ferdinand's influence, it doesn't lead to a war. So, no World War I timeline. Third Balkan War breaks between Germany, Greece, and the Ottoman Empire, which is joined by the Serbian states with Greece.
and Bulgaria with the Ottomans, respectively. It makes sense, even though they were fighting just before. Russia threatens to intervene in the war, but due to this, Germany stop it. So like Russia kind of has like plot armor not to collapse, I suppose. So Greece and Bulgaria win. The three pashas are replaced with the more neutral triumvirate. Russia has a liberal revolution that sees Nikolai. Wait, Greece and Bulgaria? Greece and Bulgaria. Greece and the Ottoman Empire. I don't understand this. Is it Greece and Bulgaria that fight the Ottoman Empire and the Serbs? Or is it Greece and the Ottoman Empire fighting the Serbs and the Bulgarians? Because we have Greece and Bulgaria here. I'm confused by that. Russia has a liberal revolution. Sees him to advocate. I don't get why that would have happened, besides the historical precedent. I don't know, that seems kind of like out of left field. If Russia didn't have any inciting incidents for it, I don't see why there'd be a liberal revolution. There's no war. There's no Balkan War. There's no World War. They would have no reason for it besides like an economic crisis. But what would the economic crisis come from? And wouldn't Russia just stagnate? Like I don't know. Like maybe it's another peaceful protest, the Bloody Sunday turning bloody. I'm not too certain about that. It seems a little odd. It seems like too liberal-minded. Serbia unites with Montenegro, Greece, Serbia, and Italy partition Albania, sparking a diplomatic crisis that ends with Italy and Romania leaving the Triple Alliance while Bulgaria joins. Persia has a civil war between monarchists and constitutionalists that ended Britain and Russia de facto partition country. That's cool. Britain holds elections in 1915. The Tories under the Bonar Law take power, and Ireland rebels beginning an earlier Irish War of Independence. Interesting. 1916 elections see Hughes defeat Woodrow. Canada holds Wilfrid Laurier. Okay. Crown Prince Alexander of Serbia marries Russia. Interesting. Berlin. Germany goes through a political crisis over electoral reform that enters the country beginning to liberalize. Okay. Britain goes through a political crisis involving Ireland, which leads to the Labour Party and the full independence. Full independence. Interesting. Franz Ferdinand becomes leader of Austria-Hungary, begins a political crisis by ruling Austria as a dictatorship and attempting to compromise with Hungary. Russia has a socialist revolution, leading to a declaration of a republic. Okay, cool. We have the original author commenting on the YouTube here. Greece and Serbia fight Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire. Okay, but Greece and Bulgaria are the only ones who gain anything. I see. But Okay. But what would Bulgaria get if they were... Whatever, it doesn't matter. Compromise peace. Sure. Poland and Finland gained independence from Russia. That makes sense if they had a Republican revolution. And Britain and Germany to sign an official détente agreement. So, with the name Encore of Europe, it's like a second concert of Europe, right? So, Germany and Britain aren't at war as much as they were before. Compromise with Hungary, but like Hungary... What does he mean by compromise with Hungary? Like Hungary's just independent because he wants to rule as a dictator, or could you elaborate on that? No, don't worry about it. Having to suddenly do a TLDR is, I imagine, a little difficult. With so much peace happening in Europe and no World War I, it leads to the sort of weird period of European history being repeated, echo of Encore of Europe. I like that. It's interesting too here. This is like a British Khediviate of Egypt. That weird solution where it's by law Ottoman, by right actually British. That's interesting. That's still here. I'm surprised that the Italians didn't take this yet. If the Ottomans don't have overlordship over that, I don't know. I think Inferno made this map, is what Occam said. South Africa doesn't change. Oh wait, America. What is this? Interesting alternate resolution to the Chaco War. Russia having the divide of Iran, but then having a
revolution that causes the monarchy to be deposed, which leads to Finland and Poland seceding. Wouldn't that also happen with Iran? Like there's a power vacuum in Iran suddenly, which then leads to the British side of the country taking over this side. That could be interesting. That could lead to Britain and Germany fighting Russia. That hasn't happened yet. That's what it looked like before. God, I can understand why there's a war then. If it's Britain and Germany fighting Russia, then Russia needs to be friends with France. Italy left the Triple Alliance. Is the Triple Alliance these three guys? I'm not too sure about that. I can see Italy going for Austria. Austria might still be a Germany. Germany could also go for Austria. I don't know about that. Hungary, if it's separate, would go with... Okay, so this is really compelling. There's a lot of dynamics here that could lead to an interesting Hoi4 mod. Still have a warlord China, which could go way differently without Soviet influence and no support of the KMT. I like this timeline. I think this is really interesting. There's some things that I find a little bit like weird, like Russia just kind of like having revolutions that don't change their borders too much. Is Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Bulgaria secretly? That's the Triple Alliance. All right, because Italy, it was the Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria, and Italy. Bulgaria was secretly involved. Italy leaves because they're not getting their fair shake out of the agreement. Now Italy has a reason to go against Austria. Germany and Austria, Hungary don't have any real reason to fight. So then it would be Italy, France, but Britain is having a detente with Germany. Maybe it's like Imperial Federation because there's no First World War. But this is 1918? What? Oh, so it's 1918, but there's no... Okay. So there would be an Imperial Federation. I think that's important to note. There would be an Imperial Federation that unifies the British monarchy, whatever. They don't have a reason to fight. But then is it Iberia? Oh, jeez. Italy. Not Italy. Oh my god. Not Iberia. Not Italy. Ireland. Ireland being fully independent is a little interesting. But then that leads to an interesting conflict. So there you go. But then you have Germany and Britain. If they're detente, then the two biggest navies in Europe are working together. Like, what would France and Italy do about that? They could have dominate the Mediterranean. If the Ottomans want to regain control of the Khediviate, it could be Britain, Germany, Austria versus France, Italy, Russia, Ottomans, and they take that. And then Balkan shenanigans. This is like, oh man, I actually really like this. This is kind of like Age of Imperialism, I think. Age of Imperialism is a Hoi4 mod where, excuse me, there's no First World War, and I don't know if they took inspiration with that or not, but it reminds me of that roughly. Libya is largely not under Italian control. It's okay. World War I start later? I think so, because there's so many instances of these conflicts ended without any real escalation. This is a good timeline. I recommend checking out Encore of Europe to get my stamp of approval. Maybe I got another one or two in me. Let's see here. Let's just do this one quickly. Following World War I, the establishment of the Weimar Republic, Russia wins the Civil War to greatly support Britain and the United States. Britain, exhausted from fighting in war, supporting the whites, retreats to isolation, focusing on internal and later federalizing his empire. By 1929, the corrupt political extremist infiltrated Weimar collapses into civil war between the socialists in the south, nationalists in the east, and Democrats in the west. Italy becomes fascist like historical, and with Russia aided the nationalists in Germany, Spain. So Russia wins the civil war, so it's a white civil war. Okay. Russia and Italy partition. Okay, so it's a Russia-Italy time. Okay. Poland and Japan. But how big is Poland? If the whites won the civil war, how big is Poland? France, Poland, Japan formed the Second Entente in response to an emerging nationalist threat. That makes sense. There was a Polish-Japanese alliance. Russia invades Poland.
triggering World War II. Both the U.S. and Britain remain neutral. No, that's not. No, that wouldn't happen in this case. I don't think Britain would get involved for sure. But that's because they want these factions to win, right? Second Entente collapses by 1950, and Axis win the war. There you go. 7 years for such a one-sided war is kind of extreme. The Treaty of London sees Japan split into a Chinese-occupied South and Russian-occupied North. I guess. But wouldn't they just... I don't know. Poland and the Baltics annexed into Russia. Yeah. And France ceded territory... So France still exists. Cedes territory to the Basque country to Spain. Spain was involved. In Corsica and Tunis to Italy, that makes sense. France collapses the Civil War after it failed the de Gaullist coup. Alongside economic turmoil of the 1950s, it seized them. The colonial empire collapsed violently. 1961, International Community of Nations is formed by the U.S., Britain, Nordic and Benelux countries to counter the nationalist Holy League between Russia, Italy, Austria, Spain, Germany, and Hungary. For an alternate Cold War setup, that's interesting. I don't think that the Democrats would have just sat by and let this happen, though. Decolonization is slower, much more violent. Well, why would it? Why would it when the French colonial empire collapsed? Like, the precedent for anti-colonialism is already there. U.S. aids rebel groups in Cameroon and Ethiopia to gain independence and caused the nationalist empire to collapse by the 90s. Okay, interesting. Russia and China remain nationalist. Spain and Italy have violently transferred to democracy, and the International Community of Nations stands triumphant by the 2000s. You know, that's not that bad. Like I don't really agree with some of the stuff in the beginning, but I would be interested to see a map of this ending scenario. So I recommend that. Yeah, sorry if I didn't advertise it enough. I think I only mentioned it in like a little bit of a post. Maybe next time I'll do that. I was just kind of afraid of what would happen if I brought my YouTube-centered community and my Discord community all to post at once when there's so many people that want feedback. Even just from mostly Discord people, that's pretty crazy. Maybe we'll do one more. Let's see. One thing I will say. Yeah, I'll try to be polite with this one. The Marshall Mission, its mission was to create a unified Chinese democracy. I want to quickly double check my history in this. Marshall Mission. The Marshall Mission was a failed diplomatic mission sent by U.S. Army George C. Marshall to China in an attempt to negotiate between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalists to create a unified Chinese government. So there's, due to it, among others, the general misunderstanding of the situation, it failed to leading to the continuation of the Chinese Civil War, which was won by the Communists. But what if it went differently? Mid-French versus intense negotiations, a deal would be reached. After the U.S. proposed the widow of Sun Yat-sen to become the leader of the Republic, it was game over for both sides. Rejecting this proposal would doom legitimacy. Chiang was first against this. U.S. threats cutting off supply and recognized as a CCP. No. The U.S. would never do that under this circumstance. They're already poising to fight a Cold War with the Soviets, and they're threatening to completely just abandon China. It's like, yeah, maybe that will work, but that level of if anything like that ever went public, China would be like, okay, fine, we're all going communist now. Fuck American imperialism. They're just trying to subjugate a country with capital. Like, this would be the biggest PR victory for the communists in China forever, because the May 4th movement, whatever, all that stuff, like, Taiwan would have fallen to China. Like, that like, straight up, if they ever imposed that would make no sense. And then also dictating who would be the leader of the republic before it had an election. no, that's not how America would run things if they were democratic at all, right? Um, a joint civilian CCP KMT cabinet was established, but that was already what was happening before. Like in 1920, there was a united front between the Chinese and the KMT. It was the first one. They were doing the Northern Expedition, and then when Shanghai found the communist partisans and was opened the door to the Kuomintang nationalist military, the military killed the communists in Shanghai, which then led to the KMT controlling the city and the CCP, the communists, breaking the United Front, led to Wang Jingwei trying to organize a rival government, which then was also, like, the Soviets were trying to get them to do certain things. They backed down. Like, the amount of negative will between the KMT and the CCP means, and this is the sort of thing, right? This is where I would recommend this person watch my How to Alt-Hist video. You have the outcome that you want. You want the Chinese Civil War to be avoided so that there's a unified nationalist democratic China, right? The point of divergence is not this thing succeeds somehow. The point of divergence needs to be something that would lead to this meeting between the communists and the Chinese nationalists to actually work. And this is what I just came up with. Wang Jingwei being the leader of the Kuomintang and fighting against the Japanese would lead to there actually being some measure of goodwill between the communists and the KMT, because you have a KMT leader that was historically vocal against the suppression of the United Front, leading the KMT. Instead of him being associated with Japanese collaboration because he was leading the place beforehand, maybe they could do that. But then again, wouldn't Wang, because he believed that there was no hope fighting the Japanese, just continuously concede things to Japan? I don't know for sure. There's a lot of ramifications, but if it does go historically, the way it did historically, where there was a incident that caused China and Japan to be fighting anyway, and Wang wouldn't really want to be conceding the state that he finally has to himself to the Japanese. And one of the reasons why he potentially collaborated with the Japanese is because he had been trying for decades to try to take over China and failed consistently. So then he's like, you know what, I'm just going to buddy up with Japan instead. Anyway, regardless, whatever. If he's leading KMT when this Marshall mission comes, and we already know that Wang was already sort of collaborative with capitalists despite being a socialist, maybe this could actually work. And instead of trying to get the Republic to be a leader that nobody agrees on, Wang might actually have enough goodwill with the CCP to undermine the Mao Zedong-centered CCP to then have like a moderate CCP and a radical CCP. You would still have the radical CCP trying to do another fight, but then they could be expelled. And then you'd have a China that's democratic, unified, not USSR aligned because of a failed Maoist takeover, but then you would also have the thing where, like, Wang doesn't want to be aligned with the USA either. He has communists in his parliament. There would be a neutral China, socialist, still KMT, have communist sympathy, could go either way. The civil wars less so. There's capitalist reforms earlier. China could be like a real superpower in that case. So I might have just made a really good alternate history by accident. So I want to hear what you guys think about this, but I'll try to quickly read this. No, honestly, I'm not going to. I already detailed how I don't really believe that is a particularly suitable point of divergence, so there's not much point reading the rest, which is potentially pretty rude. I'm sorry for that. But I hope that this suggestion of a different point of divergence may lead to a more fleshed out timeline. Like, it could be that you take everything that you just had already and just do it again. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is that you could still use what you have just with a different point of divergence. But I'm not going to spend more time on that because I've already voiced most of my opinions on this, and I want to move on. You have a timeline you need feedback on. Yeah, people keep asking if I should do a second one of these. I might. Maybe we do it like every week. I don't know. This could be good content. My own world, the Cold War and World War II. Okay, hold on. I'm just gonna look at other things. So we looked at this. This seems kind of AI generated. Syndicalists won the Second World War. Journey 1, World 1. Russian Revolution happened in 1936. The Syndicalists won the Second World War. Okay, so what we got here. So this is interesting map. What? If the Syndicalists won the Second World War, why does France... am I seeing this right? Like, why is there French colonies? What? Okay. Capitulation of Canada. Wild Creek ended. French violence. Second World War, denouncing. Germany failed to take Paris. The French Commune triumphed over Germany. The Soviets pushed east. They pushed west. Western Europe stands united under the Paris Accord. Germany is punished under international occupation. Soviets triumphed over Germany. They installed loyalist regimes in Poland, Lithuania, Moldova, East Union Baltic Republic. Regimes have their own problems. Estonian separatists. Oh, why would they ever have a united? I don't really agree with that. It doesn't make sense for the Soviets to want a unified Baltic when, yeah, they would want to join the Finnish. Moldova may seek to reform Romania. Interesting. Okay. Illyria has been placed under Tito's control. Okay. Serbia has their own communist revolution. All claiming to have the Yugoslav mantle. So it's a divided Yugoslav. Bulgaria's orientation towards Moscow and Illyria's orientation towards Paris make the situation more complicated, especially for Serbia. Okay, so I appreciate that, where there's like a divided Yugoslavia between two different ideologies. It is an AI generated? Okay, well, I'm sorry about that. I want to take a better look at it. There's just a lot to look at. If you're able to do a TLDR, I would be able to take a look at it. It's just that there's so much there that it's hard for me to process. So here we have the divided Yugoslavia. Greece and the communists. Which kind of communists? Ambitions to create the Megali idea. Communist Megali? There's rebirth of the Byzantine Empire? What? So, I don't think this person particularly understands communist ideology that much. There were some French communists who were fans of the of having France be Algeria being France, but the syndicalists would not be in this timeline, and they would be using the fact that Algeria is fighting the Algiers regime as an advantage in their war against nationalist France. Yeah, maybe they take Corsica. They don't annex. They don't annex this. They liberate the rest of France. Greek communists would not be seeking to restore the Megali idea, nor would they ever take the mantle of the Byzantine Empire under any circumstances. That is just not plausible at all. It seems like a weird, like, I wanted this to happen, but it's a communist victory timeline, but I'm going to have it happen anyway sort of thing. Like, no, I don't agree with that. Arms modernization slowly drifting towards the French syndicalism. French syndicalism, oh god. Syndicalism is anti-monarchy. At least it should be, especially the French syndicalism. Ottomans becoming more constitutional republic would not prevent them from facing the wrath of the workers in the revolution. It is too little too late for the Ottomans. It is lock the F into reactionism and maybe modernize a bit to appease people. You're not gonna be peaceful with the French. Yeah. Wang Jingwei put the red banner over China, partially defeat Japan. Warlord cliques waning power. China, Korea, Japan, Socialist Republic of China, Taiwan under Mao Zedong. Okay, I can't. I'm not gonna read this. I'm not a fan. I'll just put it that way. So while Valkyrie is working on the TLDR, we'll see if we can find something else. So we already talked about this. We already talked about that. I'll give my approval of that. Multipolar Europe. There was one that was like a bunch of KR Cold. There we go. Kaiserreich Cold Wars, my specialty. There's a Kaiserreich Cold War dump that's been active on the channel, on the Discord for a bit, so that's good. Year is 1958. Especially the brink. German Republic surrendered to the Russian state and French Republic. The world will never be the same. Tensions increased between the Russians and the French. Tensions brewed in the Balkans, and combined the line the rooster would soon be faced with the bear. In the East, socialists triumphed over China. The Indian Federation supported with bitter eyes for separate Asia and the precipice near 7 months. The tenuous peace between Chicago and Sacramento expires. Then we'll find peace, or we'll all be consumed in the fires of war. So, American constitutional convention is split along the Rocky Mountains. Australasia is still Confederation. Deccan is the Imperial Federation. So let's look at this. So the Algiers regime still exists. The Russian state controls this. It's like a mix between my timelines of what was it, Camp Gig and Barbary with the split here, but this actually split. Krasnach with the border on the Elbe. Algiers regime still existing, like in my version of Krasnach. But let's see what else this is doing. Do they have a TLDR? Kaiserreich, KR Civil War, Russia versus France, Totalist Italy, Vanguardist Socialist Union Britain, and Anarcho-Syndicalist Iberia, Ultra-Syndicalist France. Okay, Old Soviet Russia, National Liberal Romania, don't know what else. Austria isn't dead. The United States split. 58 in wars holding. Okay. Having these people be syndicalist is like, I suppose it works. Do you don't like the little Danubia? I kind of like it. I think that it makes sense for a buffer state. Having the Ottomans be a partner of Russia makes sense, I suppose. Really can't go too wrong with this. Looks pretty good to me. Russia, Savinkov, Lithuania, Nationalist Revolt, Poland, Romania, Social Liberal, Anarcho-Cindy. Yeah, pretty straightforward. Russians can carry Algiers. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I know, I not too much to give feedback wise here. I like it. There's a lot here from P that I want to review, but I want to end it with the TLDR of that Hispanica. He's still working on it though, so I don't want to rush him though. Okay, let's just go back to that red tsunami. Okay, so this one, and then the Habsburg, Spain, and then we're done. USSR and Germany militarized, stress a front. Germany finds its ready to resolve Testosterone military reform. The Soviet Union prepared its own offensive. Starts in Holstein. What? It starts in Holstein for years and must slowly built, but they've exploded into violence. It decries the treatment of the proletariat and sends troops into Holstein. What's going on here? I believe that there's some context that I'm missing. Is this a Führerreich timeline? Where the Holstein exists as its own thing? What is this? Is a Taiwan, Italy with... Okay, why do you have a Taiwan, France, with the Algiers regime being occupied by? I don't really like that. What are these protectorates here? Yeah, another split Greece. That split Greece doesn't make sense. British protectorate over Egypt in here, I suppose. But I don't know about this. There's just something weird about this. I'm sure there's decent lore, but like just looking at the end result, like what is this? The Second Great War as of January 31st. Okay, so this is like war in progress. If it's war in progress, yeah, fine. But what are these? If this is France, then what are these? Is it more France? Is there two different Frances? What's going on here? Second Sino-Japanese War. Yeah, there's a lot of discussions here. Gains are slow, but beginning to compound. I don't know. I feel like those would be pretty straightforward. Wow. Okay, this. You can tell that he's put a lot of work into this, and I don't want to shit on it, but what about the Habsburgs? Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much to comment on this because there's no TLDR for me to quickly understand things. Yeah, let's see. This one's short. Let's do this one. There's 5 powers fighting each other: Coalition of Freedom, the United States, the Imperial Pact, led by British fascists, French exiles, and Italians. Okay. The Socialist Einheit, German Socialists, Comintern and the Soviets, Imperial Way. Okay. 1918 to 1919 German Revolution. Socialists were both a tad more successful, called the Weimar Republic was also more willing to negotiate. December concessions. Central left nations with the rise of the Nazis. They still get elected, have less political power. They try to do their BS, but they actually have a revolution. Spartacist Constitution. German socialists having more power than other parties, did not have more party. Soviet style regime, blah blah blah. So there'd still be democratic socialism, so it's not like the Soviets. Okay. Yeah, German and Soviets are OP. Yeah, I agree with that last timeline. Like they wouldn't be able to. Poland wouldn't be able to resist for that long. The British public seeing the failings of the economy, other things going wrong, the radical colonial expansionist voices weren't listened to, and they should quiet down. They're focused on internal politics outwards, even this they've done. Everyone wanted to be a good place to live. Don't know what it looked like. The cities of Britain being isolationist. Germans and the Soviets all having different ideals of socialism. Looking both would be a socialism being good. They helped each other build up technology sharing, worker education exchanges. I guess that is possible. Soviets had the idea communism, socialism in one country. You're incorrect about that. But Germany did things differently. They actively created, supported, and endorsed socialist parties and groups in many other nations. So this person doesn't understand what this socialism in one country ideology is. People assume that it meant that Stalin only cared about the Soviet Union. But I guess that's partially true. Maybe this person's right then. Germany was actively attempting to get other people to revolt, while the Soviets were more focused on internal politics. But I think that both would still have the capability of, like, the Germans would be held back by the fact that they don't have a necessarily revolutionary ideology like the Soviets do, so they wouldn't really be able to support revolutions or anything like that. While the Soviets would have the revolutionary ideology, but then Stalin would be like, we need to perfect socialism here before we spread it to other places. And it's socialism in one country, not communism. While we all refer to the Soviet Union as communist today because of the ideology that they yearned for was a communist society, they never said that they were a communist state. They said that they were working towards that, but they were currently in the socialism phase.
I still think that there would be a disagreement between the Soviets and the Germans to the point where they wouldn't be able to collaborate, but I still think that this is a decent approach. Okay, this only Lithuania, Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Austria, and Luxembourg all had socialism win elections. Just funding things doesn't cause them to win, though, and people can play dirty, and then if it has a revolution, then it's more Soviet aligned. So I don't know. Like this is weak, but I understand the vision going forward, so that makes sense. The French parties are simply too unpopular due to the French Republic being popular in the war during the reforms. What? The French parties were simply too unpopular due to the French Republic being very popular after the war. But what about the United Front that won in like 1936 under Leon Blum? Like there's a big socialist movement in France that's being kind of ignored here. Like you could have France go fascist, but then if you're having Britain go fascist, then they'll be allies. And it seems like a lot of this is like made to like have a different scenario, to have it be a five-way civil war. That's even the premise. No, it's a five-way civil war, a five-way war, and you know, fair enough. But I feel like this is a little bit of a weak point. The third German-Franco War. French government being popular. This is unrealistic. Yeah, implausible. Czechs didn't like the socialist parties very much. They didn't like the Germans very much. They didn't like the Soviets at all. When the Germans started funding socialist parties, the Czechs declared this illegal. When they kept going, the Czechs declared the parties outlawed. When they continued to be elected locally, if they're outlawed, how they're being elected locally? Czechs continue to escalate. Just hang the leaders. Blah. Germans threatened war. The French defended their Czech allies. The Germans said Herr mit dem Krieg and invaded the Czechs. In a coincidence, the war ends within a year to the weekend declaration. The Republic flees. Oh, okay. I see. That's fucking bonkers, if I could pardon my French. You have a socialist Germany invading fortified Czechoslovakia, which is like, okay, maybe because of the political instability, there'd be enough local collaboration, and then the Slovakians would want to be independent, and there's the Sudeten Germans and Czech. Yeah, whatever. Okay, fair enough. Czech might fall. Not France. The Maginot Line? Like, are you serious? Having a socialist Germany that's still abiding by the Treaty of Versailles, beating Czechoslovakia, and then expelling France to the colonies? It would make more sense if it was like a homegrown socialist revolution in France causes the nationalists to flee to the colonies, not Germany manages to get a overlordship over France for free, somehow beating the Maginot Line. That I don't particularly agree with that. The French losing power and military control are forced to sell and give up colonies. Indochina gets given to the Japanese. You just have Japan seize it. Don't have it be sold. Drama. Madagascar gets sold to the Portuguese. No, the Portuguese couldn't manage that. Much of the Gold Coast is handed over to the British. Why not just have the British, like, people would just take it, you know what I mean? I don't know if they would be able to sell it. Would sell it to who? With what money? Like, what money would they would get the money for their colonies, right? But what would the money that they had from these sales be able to do to help them? Like what? Like pay for mercenaries? There's just some aspects to this that I'm not particularly the biggest fan of. I understand what they're going for, but not that. The British seem to follow their close ally to communism, but it's thought of socialism. Elected authoritarian nationalist party align themselves with Italy. Elected central radical party that shatters the empire. The British Crown frees to... no. The British Crown wouldn't... Oswald Mosley was pro-British monarchy. The British monarchy, especially under Edward, would still be pro-Oswald. You could say that there could be some people that would want to flee to the colonies to avoid being killed in like a power struggle. Sure. Yeah, just have that then. Have Canada follow the USA then. be put into kind of like a Project Justice situation, but instead of Edward being the guy, it's like George or whatever his brother was. That makes sense. I don't know what would happen in Australia though, but Canada falling into the USA aligned faction with a rival government. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Much of the empire not in Africa falls to rebellion and conquest during brief conflicts in the Irish Troubles. Much of Arabia falls, Terran government is overthrown. Canada's on. I feel like this person doesn't realize, like, it's a very optimistic view on how the British would react to having like a fascist run to power. I want to quickly finish this before we move on to the Habsburg one. Malaysia follows the Japanese, Caribbean follows. Like this, I don't know. Japan getting all of Indochina and Malaysia for free basically is a lot. Gibraltar, Malta, and Cyprus could have easily fallen if not for French and Italian help. Okay. The Italians loved the situation they were in. They had the great European powers needing the help of the great nation of Italy. Many investments came into Italy, and theorists, yeah, okay, sure. Italy gets more powerful, sure. So, Spanish Civil War, it's been delayed due to their not having as much confidence, but Franco wasn't the guy who did the coup, so that doesn't matter. Due to the British anti-isolation and two major socialist powers, the nationalist and socialist sides of Spain get split up. Northern regions of Spain, Galicia, and around it, British influence and nationalism. But Carlists, UK backed, I'm not too sure about that. Portuguese American backed, that's interesting. Soviet Republican backed, yeah. Nationalist Italian backed. Looking national syndicalists, yeah. Catalonians German backed because it's like the, yeah, like the anarcho. But no, I think it would make more sense for the socialist leaning, not too revolutionary Germans to support the socialist, not too revolutionary leading Spanish Republicans, while the Soviets could have, well, yes, Catalonia was anarchist. You could have them trying to like prop up a Stalinistic communist thing there instead. Or you could have the Republicans of the Republicans united with the Catalonian movement, and then having a split over Catalonia, or just having the anarchists be separate. Yeah, I don't know. Like I can appreciate this. This is like going somewhere good, I feel. But there's certain aspects of this that are weak, like the socialist Germans managing to capitulate mainland France. I think it would make more sense for them to have a revolution of some kind, but then a social democrat revolution would only make sense if it's a nationalist France. But what would cause a nationalist France to happen specifically in the time period that you want? And would this revolutionary France even be friends with Germany? Would not be Soviet aligned if it's a revolutionary state? And then this is like a very romantic perspective on how socialists and communists see each other, especially when Stalin coined the term social fascist to elaborate on what he believed social democrats were. Like, yeah, like I would look into those historical things a little more, but I appreciate the what you've put together here. There's a lot of potential for this, and I appreciate you submitting that. So while there's a lot of things here that I really want to look at and give the time of day, this will be the last one that I'll be reviewing today. The Valkyr has a very long and in-depth series here that I want you to I would like for you guys to check out. Feel free to. There's a lot of good writing here. So good that people think it's AI. But let's see, a brief resume. Okay, Charles II, main change with our timeline that various things go better for a Spanish Habsburg. Charles itself isn't as sick as in real life. I think Charles II is that inbred guy, so like just genetic lottery, he doesn't get nearly as effed up. Juan Jose of Austria doesn't die very early on, managing to do the reforms he wanted to, mainly regarding the military. Maria Louisa, the first wife of Charles, doesn't die early on. It's a major thing that she actually loved and supported the king. Okay. The counselor of the king can actually do his economic policies. He can do in the influence of the second spouse, the queen. He's just an IRL competent economist. Okay, so just things are going better for the stability of Spain. Regarding Elizabeth I, she is very much inspired by Catherine II, being what Spain needed in that century, an actual competent ruler. So because the king is like, the queen then is the regent, and she manages things way better than the king. Yeah, that makes sense. Expand the Enlightenment movement in Spain. Into the 18th century, start the industrialization of Spain. Spain in this timeline is a stronger economy. She had mostly stayed passive in Europe, with the exception of the 7 Years' War and the American Independence War. The main change of our timeline is that she would secure influence on Italy, and especially Tuscany. Okay. During the War of the Polish Succession, Spain maintained its neutrality, intervening only diplomatically in the question of Tuscany. After the death of Gaston de' Medici, without heirs, the throne was vacant. Both France and Austria wanted to impose their own candidate. However, Spain intervened to secure its influence in the region, forcing through the threat of intervention the coronation of a junior branch of the Medici, the Princes of Ottajano. Thus, Joseph Ottajano Medici was crowned as the close ally of Spain. But Charles II would still die heirless, right? Does that mean that the Austrians would get a personal union over Spain? So the reason why the War of the Spanish Succession happened was there was the Habsburg king of Charles II, who was a Habsburg, but he signed off the succession of Spain to go to France. I don't know why he chose France to be the inheritor of Spain, but the Habsburg Austrians didn't want that, obviously, so they went to war with France. I think it's this war, on top of funding the American Civil War revolution, that caused France to have its own revolution. If you have a Habsburg Spain, you could have a Austrian person of Spain, but then again, you don't necessarily need to have the Habsburgs dominating Spain through a personal union with Austria for there to be an interesting timeline. But one thing I feel like is a little bit of a weird thing is to have like Charles II be more healthy and then somehow have a kid. I think that it's kind of like poetic justice for the Habsburgs to have been inbred so many times that they can't have healthy kids anymore, which then leads to their eventual downfall, because they were basically like exploiting a glitch in the monarchy game. So I would say that would be something that is interesting to consider. There's a lot of things that could happen with Spain that's a little more economically whatever. You could have the Spanish Civil War ending with a Habsburg on the throne but not a personal union. But then what's going to happen with that after the Napoleonic Wars is an interesting thing to consider. I think the Napoleonic Wars would still happen. It's just a matter of how strong would Spain be to see the end of that. Would Spain's larger economy mean that they would be able to resist the French more? Or would the economy and the cultural impact that these rulers had over Spain be enough to cause their downfall in 1836 and beyond to not be nearly as significant, causing a better world for them? There's a lot of interesting questions that this timeline proposes that I do not have the mental fortitude to answer, unfortunately. But if you guys want to learn more about this, you can. Charles is in real life a far better king than a lot of Bourbons. He wanted to rule and actually did a good job with what he had to face. The thing I love about Charles is his quote. It's like, he continued to baffle Christianity by continuing to live. You hear a bell ringing. Is there any church near your house? I had an alarm on my phone go off. I'm not near a church. Charles II, this Valkyrie guy is saying. Problem is he was just so unhealthy that, I don't know, and then just like writing off his health to be better. I don't know. Like, it would have been nice for Spain if the whole Wars of Succession things were avoided, but this timeline could explore that. I'm just not a fan of like this person's healthier as a point of divergence. Okay, well, that's all the timelines I'll be reviewing for this stream. When it comes to other streams, this stream actually did pretty well performance-wise, I think. So I might do another one of these. It is kind of exhausting, a lot of prep work, and then even then, it still wasn't enough to. There's still a lot of prep work to do this, and it still wasn't enough to cover everything with the respect that it deserves for the amount of effort that people put into this. But I hope that if you guys are interested in talking with these people who volunteered their timelines to be reviewed, to talk more on my Discord server, that would be pretty cool. If you want to submit your own things for now, because I'm not sure if I'll do another one of these or not, I would go into the alternate history sharing forum. Yeah, I might do this again. I'm not too sure. I'll think about it, but I'm glad that you guys tuned in and were an engaged chat. Appreciate all that a lot. It's really cool to have such a creative community and that we can collaborate together. I hope that if I reviewed your timeline, I didn't like it, that you weren't sad. I did my best to be fair with my critiques, but in some cases, like, yeah, so. But anyway, everybody who volunteered their timeline, they made themselves vulnerable, and, I appreciate and respect that. It takes a lot to be able to have the courage to cross the threshold that way. But anyway, enough yapping. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I hope you have a good day. Goodbye. On stream when the music ends in a cool way, so we'll just wait here for a bit. Yeah, thank you. I'll try to rest. Thanks.